London's done a fantastic job.
The Department of Government Efficiency says it's saved American taxpayers more than $150 billion so far. But new data shows despite deep cuts to government services, DOGE hasn't made a dent in the deficit. According to the Treasury Department, spending is up more than $139 billion in the first 3 months of President Trump's new term, with the federal government borrowing $41 million more during that period than last year. Democrats are now questioning whether DOGE is adding to the deficit by making cuts that later end up being overturned by the courts.
I've never seen any of their responses contain cost-benefit analysis as they wipe out people from offices who they have to recall 2 or 3 days later.
President Trump is defending DOGE, pointing out it's finding and stopping significant fraud throughout the government, including almost $400 million in fraudulent unemployment payments over the past 5 years.
And some of it is just absurd, like people getting unemployment insurance who haven't been born yet. I mean, I think anyone can appreciate whether, I mean, come on. That's just crazy.
But even some Republicans are starting to worry that the cost cutting isn't enough, and DOGE needs to go after bigger fish.
You watch, next year we'll spend more money than we did this year, and the year after that we will.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, November 23rd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. I've got a great show planned for you today. A lot that I want to get to, so we're going to get right into it. Some pretty important developments. DOGE, we're going to start with today. Not really because the awareness around that story is, I'm sure most of you out there are very aware of what we're going to cover around that, but about how it relates to other topics today. Most importantly, honestly, the Mamdani meeting, and interestingly thinking about the premise and how this all started. Cutting costs and shrinking government, and then having this really nice, wonderful meeting with the socialists that Trump thinks is going to save New York City, and really trying to piece together how that makes sense, unless, maybe so, it is some 4D chess move that's meant to manipulate people. That's not even, to me, that's a 50-50 call. I think that happens all the time on both, aside from the ridiculous term of 4D chess, it's just, both sides of the paradigm try to play themselves as well as the people in often ways. And I think this could be one of those. But I want to reflect on what this shows us as we go through the show today. Not just the DOGE reality, and of course, briefly pointing to the actual reality behind it, which was the artificial intelligence, the large language models, the access of Israel to all of your data. That's really all that amounted to. We'll touch on that briefly to start, but the overlap again with where the government is actually going and what it means to have that kind of a relationship, which from my perspective, outside of the fact that I don't trust Mamdani any more than I trust Trump, is that it shows you what we would want realistically for the government to work with each other and not hate each other based on difference of opinions. It's what we pretended we always were. So, but I think we all sense that that's not really what this is. Even though you get some that will go, look, Trump's just trying to bring the unity party together. It's the point to make is what he's promised to his people, and then what this shows you and how you can possibly rectify those things. Not to say that it's not people outside of the paradigm might not like what they're seeing. My point about more government and what his beliefs are. And I don't think this makes sense for anybody who sees the promises, but we'll get into all of that and how kind of just and the main part is the manipulation of the overlap of him being Muslim and how that connects with the Muslim Brotherhood we're going to discuss today. But just, the just inherent dishonesty to all of this stuff and the immediacy of being able to prove these things. Israel and Gaza today. If we get time, we'll talk about that and the reality of how blatantly dishonest it is from day one and how you can prove that they're lying and the narrative just keeps continuing. It's something we've touched on a lot over the last year or so, and it really just becomes confounding and almost sort of like scientifically interesting to kind of stand back in 20, 30, 100 years and go, how the hell did that actually happen? Was it just us needing to just push it a little bit further? One more march, one more show. It's hard to say. The point is, I think we all see it. I think the majority recognizes the issue. And they know we see it, and it just keeps going. Whether that's a genocide or the lie of the two-party paradigm, I don't know. On top of the ones we mentioned, we're going to get into Twitter, the interesting overlap of the app, country of origin, and how that shows you something very interesting. Not just the Israel DHS part, but the bot scenario and how both partisans are trying to make it about only the other side, which is kind of entertaining, but frustrating at the same time. Marjorie Taylor Greene overlap with Trump and the lack of support, largely from independents, which is the majority of the conversation, which people don't talk about, but also how that again relates to Mamdani, the meeting, Muslim Brotherhood, the designation of as a terrorist organization that Trump is saying he's going to be doing. Robert writing about that, calling this exactly, and really I want you to hopefully see, regardless of what you think the Muslim Brotherhood is, regardless of what it may actually be, it's about what they're using the designation for. It's very important to think about. So we'll go through all that today. Hopefully you will stay tuned. It's going to be an important show, I think, with just, until the next one, for how much important information I think connects multiple stories into one agenda, really. So let's start with the DOGE part of this. I just can't get past how, like I was saying, something that is so obvious. All of the whether you want to look at the information, the facts, their own wall of receipts, and how many times you can prove that they were caught lying, just blatantly misrepresenting the facts. And as if, and let's just say every other thing was true, you still blatantly caught them trying to deceive you. And that should be enough to make you recognize that it's not what it seems. But we know, just to state out of the gate, the costs were not cut. Now, I played that clip, was just a random mainstream media clip to start, talking about just the deficit overlap and the spending versus the cuts. But the point is, we found out the cuts weren't even really cuts. In many cases, most, to be honest, large amounts of money that were simply shifted into other things. So they didn't really cut it. They didn't show you that, or pointing to cuts that happened in the last administration and saying it added to this, or things that didn't even get cut or moved and just lying about it. Or, on and on and on. So the point to understand, if you disagree with me, please break out the facts and present it, because I think you'll find out that you're wrong, that the information outside of narratives, right? They'll tell you that you're right, but the facts show that they didn't cut costs in any real sense. And as Massey will tell you, the spending will increase because it is right now. Everything's increasing in cost for you, and government is only getting bigger. And guess what Mamdani wants? More government in your life, because that will say, that's where this all continues to go. So Justin Amash pointed this out. This is where I saw it first, so I wanted to shout that out. And he just simply said, RIP Doge. It was never going to amount to much more than a marketing gimmick without a president actually serious about cutting spending. Exactly. And you don't need a Doge or a gimmick to cut spending. You really don't. Realistically, Congress would be the most obvious block. Let's just say you had a president that was like absolutely down to cut spending. The point that Trump made and then didn't follow through with is that there are many ways as the president that you can make that happen. Just whether it's executive orders or something else. Congress would likely push back on that, because I think all of them are invested in the status quo. But there are many ways that they could maneuver that. The point is that the president, the administration, had no interest in doing so. Neither did the one before it. And then Congress is happy to keep that going. And he says only a president that has the leverage to cut to get Congress to cut. And this president, like all recent presidents, is interested only in spending more. And you can debate narratives, but the outcome, the continual precedent, is really all you need to see, because history shows you that no matter what they say, that's what happens. And of course, you could argue that they wanted to, even tried to, and it didn't happen, which is just more evidence, testament to my always point that our government never changes, because it's not meant to. It's set in a certain way, whether they know that or not. And I think they know that. History shows you that. Just got to start learning our lessons here. And Reuters breaks the article down we'll get into right now. Executive exclusive. DOGE doesn't exist with 8 months left on its charter. This came out today. U.S. President Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency has disbanded, and with 8 months left in its mandate, which is very interesting to me, because if you didn't meet your goals and you have 8 months left to meet them, to me, this is really obvious that it was never even meant to reach those goals. They think, in my mind, this is how I interpret it, that this is a good moment to do this because we're looking in other directions. And some of us, like me, will go, oh my God, look at this. They're lying to you from before. But you'll get the screamers online that won't point to this, of course. Also note how few of the screamers on the left, will also not mention it, other than certain people. I always think that's important to point out. You'll get the corporate media pointing to this, but you won't really get what it should be. Like an absolute, like borderline impeachment level manipulation, which I'm not touching on that today, but there is potential impeachment stuff coming forward from Democrats, of course, but it'll get called one-sided like it always is, even though him or Biden or all the rest before him should also have been impeached. But the point here is that this is something where were we the just lost my spot ending where we disbanded 8 months left. So the point was that, with all that time left, it pretty much shows you that they're not even attempting to try to do that while spending more. That's pretty obvious. Ending initiative launched with fanfare as a symbol of Trump's pledge to slash the government's size, but which critics say delivered few measurable savings. But again, at a very easy cost benefit analysis, you're not, even if they cut some savings here, they spent more over here. So there is no saving. It's just a misrepresentation. There's no, the savings only amount to savings if you actually saved the money. If you cut a little savings from this one part of the conversation and spent twice as much over here, then there are no savings. There's no cutting in costs at the end of the day because we're spending more than before. The government is larger than before, like every other presidency before this. And this says, this is from the Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Cooper, who spoke with Reuters earlier this month when asked about DOGE, and he said that doesn't exist. You knew this already because they've announced this, not even really in earnest right now, but we already went through what's happening. There is no DOGE. You have Amy Gleason operating with the digital services, calling it DOGE, and just working with HHS for wearables and other health-related focuses. Has nothing to do with large cutting of costs in government spending. It just doesn't. I don't think it ever really did. And honestly, I don't even know if Elon knew that. I kind of get the sense, large picture, that he very much does with XAI and everything going on and multiple government contracts that go back through multiple left-right administrations. But you never know. It is no longer a centralized entity, Cooper added in the first public comments from the Trump administration on the end of DOGE. It says that at least 2 prominent DOGE employees, which is another overlap to this. Because if you understand the real picture that I think is obvious to this, that there was much more going on, including from Israel, that was immediately involved with what was happening inside our government, that you have people that are working through him that weren't necessarily government entities, one of which is currently in a very high position because they carried over, who had no government background, we'll touch on it, are now finding themselves in other parts of the government. Now that'll blend into the background, but who with what we saw that happen here and where the connections go to, no real background checks, no ethics pledges, just people that could be working for literally anybody, and it doesn't appear to be for the U.S. government or in the interest of American people, is what I meant to say. But same point I look at it as, but it says that body is headed by Joe Gebbia. At least 2 prominent DOGE employees are now involved in the National Design Studio, was what it said first, a new body created through an executive order signed by Trump in August, which that didn't really get reported. I'm sure it was out there somewhere, but that wasn't a lot of conversation. So that's pretty telling. And it says that body is headed by Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb, a group that is extremely connected to Israel in a lot of different ways, including using Airbnbs in illegally occupied West Bank territory. So illegal international crimes. And this is a person who has been working, and I'll show you next in a second, that's the one I was referencing, in a lot of ways blindly to support anything Israel, like basically the GHF execution lines that they called food, right? These were the ISIS-linked gangs they worked with. He's the one that rushed that through. We'll touch that in a second. And it says, and Trump's order directed him to beautify government websites. Oh, great. So DOGE is effectively boiled down to him making websites look nice. And it says Gebbia, which I don't believe that's the actual scope of what we're talking about here, but that's what it says. Gebbia was part of billionaire Elon Musk's DOGE team, while DOGE employee Edward Krasatine, nicknamed Big Balls, encouraged followers on his X account to apply to join. So remember, this guy, this young kid that had this ridiculous background that I'm not even getting into whether he has technical knowledge. To me, that's not irrelevant for what the job is, but the point wasn't about whether or not he could do the job, at least for some of these kids, or rather just younger people. But interestingly, because his background had all sorts of weird things that we could get into again, and the fact that, the name shouldn't really matter if it's really about meritocracy, but it ultimately turned out that these people were doing things that, as we'll get into in a later part of the story, that were illegal, guys. Things that were not just illegal in the sense because of what Trump and Elon were doing, but completely illegal, including even from foreign policy standpoint. And so now, I'm briefly jumping ahead, some of them are pretty damn worried that they're going to get thrown under the bus or maybe get held accountable, go to jail, because they don't think Musk or Trump are going to back them anymore, which shows you something, doesn't it? If they're now worried, why would they be worried? They're going to frame it as sort of like left, right, like the Democrats are going to go after him. I just don't ever think that's really the case. There sometimes can be personal points to it. But if you know that they did something wrong, which by the way, they did, it's not a left, right point. Now they're really worried about that because I think they see the writing on the wall. But Big Balls being one of these people that was really in there, just kind of, I'm trying to remember the exact points of the specific locations, but doing things that weren't justified, removing people, kind of basically representing the government, even though Elon was supposed to be an advisor, and he wasn't even supposed to be the one leading anything. There was supposed to be somebody else that was leading, and Elon was there advising. But he would send these people who were advisors working for the advisor, but they were the ones there calling shots to 20-year employees of the government, which I don't care much about people in the government. Point is that there's a lack of accountability and all that. And it says the fading away of DOGE is in sharp contrast to the government's wide effort over months to draw attention to it with Trump, his advisors and cabinet secretaries posting about it on social media. Musk, who led DOGE initially, regularly touted his work on Twitter platform and at one point brandished a chainsaw to advertise his efforts to cut those jobs. Now, thinking back, what a ridiculous stunt. That's why I included those in the picture today. The kitchen sink. Yeah, how'd that work out? Now, of course, you could argue that he tried as best he could and he wasn't allowed. I don't think that's really the case. I think they were all to some degree involved in knowing what they were doing. But the chainsaw and how that overlap with Argentina, how well are they doing today? It just really take a second to look back at these ridiculous showy narratives that Nick Sorter and Benny Johnson and Alex Jones and all the rest were shoving down your throat. How did it end up? Who knows if they thought it was the best thing and they were just wrong. Take note of that. People should be accountable for their statements, for their choices, for what they represent, especially when they're consistently wrong and claim that they're right all the time. It says, this is the chainsaw for bureaucracy, Musk said, holding the tool above his head at the Conservative Political Action Conference in National Harbor, Maryland in February. DOGE claimed to have slashed tens of billions of dollars in expenditures, but it was impossible for outside financial experts to verify because the unit did not provide detailed public accounting. Now, quite frankly, it's been very clearly shown that in the larger sense, this is not even close. Even if you want to claim, like we said, that they did cut costs, that the spending went up, so it doesn't really change the reality. But it's pretty clear that they were lying, guys. They got caught in very multi-billion-dollar deceptions. And it says, in the past tense, acting DOGE Administrator Amy Gleason, whose background is in healthcare tech, surprise, surprise, which is what it always was focused on, despite the narratives, formally became an advisor to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy, RFK Jr. in March, which is interesting, according to filings, in addition to her role with DOGE. Okay, but DOGE was never really there for her. And she was not really the person in charge, like we said the whole time. Nobody seemed to care about that. Her public statements have largely focused on her role at HHS, because that's always been her role. Even right now, if you look at her post, it still says acting administrator for U.S. DOGE services, but they're telling us it doesn't exist. This is all a big theater game, guys. This is a show. I mean, they must be aware of this. It's some kind of it almost has to feel like we talk about with Hegseth or Kash Patel, like maybe none of these people are actually representing what we think they are. We should start asking these questions for how much we're seeing behind the curtain right now. And now it says DOGE staff also has taken on other roles in the administration. So if you're following, the reality is we were lied to. That's not what this was about. And even if it was, they didn't even come close to achieving what they claimed and got caught lying about it many, many times. Now the people who were put in that position through dishonest measures, without any real background checks, don't forget that, guys, are now filtering their way through the government. One of them I mentioned, we'll come back to that, but here's Zachary Terrell, part of the DOGE team, given access to the government health systems in the early days of Trump's second term, is now chief technology officer at the Department of Health and Human Services. Wait a minute. What does that have to do with DOGE? And why are both Amy Gleason and this DOGE guy both heading towards HHS and wearables and the focus? Because that's likely what it was always about. My opinion, but why would these people be shucked off into positions that have nothing to do with? And it says Rachel Riley, who had the same access according to court filings, is now the chief of the Office of Naval Research. That seems like it makes sense, according to the office website. Jeremy Lewin, who helped Musk and the Trump administration dismantle the USAID institution, USAID, which did not go away. Didn't even, honestly, if it did reduce what it was doing, it's so shadowy, it's almost impossible to tell. If it did reduce it, it only simply refocused on things that we proved to you that they claim were gone. Things like climate change related focuses or spending money in Africa to promote circumcision for HIV. That is still happening to this day. I can prove it. I've done it 15 times on the show. Nobody talks about it because nobody wants to be honest about it in the partisan conversation. Weirdly, not even the left, who could make a big point about it, it doesn't happen anyway. But the point is, it didn't go away. So it's a regime change engine for foreign policy that's still very much there through the State Department, which was always actually really underneath. And he, Jeremy Lewin, who helped Musk dismantle USAID, now oversees foreign assistance, okay, at the State Department, which is the same exact thing. That's what USAID did. So they're just calling it foreign assistance of the State Department when really that's so yeah, obviously the person who dismantled USAID is now running USAID. And it says Musk, shortly after Trump's election, had said he had a mandate to delete the mountain of government regulations. He made undoing government regulations and remaking government with AI two key tenets of DOGE. Except they didn't really focus on making it over with AI, did they? They focused on cutting costs and shrinking government. But that was really always what it was about. And it's right in front of you. It always has been. And people, watching the show, the people out there that were jumping up on every soapbox they could to get to, hey, look at what's happening. And people like that still don't get the recognition they deserve. And I'm not even talking about TLAV. There's people out there that have been doing such amazing work focused only on that. That continues to say he made undoing government regulations and remaking government with AI two key tenets, in addition to eliminating federal government jobs. The administration is still working towards slashing regulations. Are they? I only see more government, more bureaucracy, more regulation, despite narratives. And I mean, this is the easiest thing to prove in the world. The White House Budget Office has tasked Scott Langmack, who was DOGE's representative at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Great. With creating custom AI applications to pour through U.S. regulations and determine which ones to eliminate according to... Cool. Well, let us know when any of them actually get eliminated. Keep building things and make more government to eliminate regulation that doesn't seem to ever really get eliminated. I mean, you get my point? They're building government under the guise of removing it both ways, both parts of the conversation. Now, I'm sure they will find regulations or bureaucracy to remove. But you let me know when that happens, and we can talk about it. So, suddenly exposed, DOGE's employees fear prosecution after Musk abandoned them. Current and former Department of Government Efficiency staffers are, which again doesn't exist, so we're talking about the digital services. Who knows what they're going to refer to it going forward, are growing increasingly concerned that the work that they did slashing government programs and eliminating jobs will come back to haunt them with the possibility of criminal prosecutions. I mean, the only way that would make sense is if they knew that either one, that they knew what they were doing was illegal in the realist sense, in every sense, which I think that's part of what they were like, foreign involvement, who knows? That's one part. Or they just know that the way they conducted themselves was ridiculous, which I agree with regardless of everything else. They went into these positions, and I have no real respect for government, but there's still a decorum in any human-to-human interaction. And these people went into these positions and acted like they could do whatever they want. They just, and the bottom line was they acted like children and did so in a way because they knew that Musk would back them and Trump would back Musk. That's the whole point here. And so in many, many ways, I think they're now going, oh man, that guy at the State Department that hates me, I'm pretty worried now because they don't seem to support me. Makes a lot of sense. And it says, worse still is their growing belief that the billionaire Elon Musk, who recruited them, won't step up to save them by appealing to Donald Trump on their behalf should things take a turn for the worse. And if you really actually look at before this first buddy situation, they don't like each other, guys. And that was pretty clear by the way it really quickly became tense after a short period of time. So I don't think that I think they see that, and that's what they're really pointing to. But it says, guys, seriously, get your own lawyer if you need it. Elon's great, but you need to watch your own back. It's just an interesting time, isn't it? Now, Jeremy P. Lewin, 28-year-old American civil servant with former tech entrepreneur who rose rapidly in the second Trump administration. He had no prior government experience before January 2025, but became a key figure in the, I guess, phantom called DOGE that never really existed and doesn't even now. So he had no prior government experience. And somehow is now a very important person in the government. And he was involved, weirdly, a guy who was never involved before. There's two ways to look at this. Either Trump is picking people like this because he knows he can then maneuver them to do whatever he needs and maybe then blame it on them and not be accountable, like blind support for Israel at a very important point of their genocide. Or the guy himself is like he believes these things himself. Like the point is that this person immediately came into the situation and then was, I think, either pushed, like I'm saying, or is the one that motivated this action. And as it says, waived a nine mandatory anti-fraud counterterrorism safeguards, 9 of them, and overrode 58 USAID staff objections in order to approve funding in only 5 days for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The ISIS-linked gangs that were raping and executing civilians, according to our own U.S. veterans that were there, according to numerous human rights organizations. Think about how insane that is. So in June, $30 million grant to this group that is literally ISIS-linked, and I might as well grab that again since we're mentioning it. Of course, it doesn't pop up now. Let's do this. See if that makes it. There we go. Got it. What's wrong with that? How Israel trained and armed ISIS-linked militias, the Haaretz leading Israeli newspaper. So he waived 9 mandatory fraud counterterrorism safeguards, 58 objections from USAID to send $30 million to an ISIS-linked gang that was known to be ISIS-linked because they literally openly discussed it in the Knesset. And of course they know because they're working with these groups. And he says, strong admin support for this one, ASAP, jam it through. Now, of course, they got wildly criticized for that by Al Jazeera and different groups, Reuters, that were discussing it because it's insane. Not only is it insane, they're committing a genocide the whole world knows about. And it seems, back to my first point, that Trump either put him there so he could ram this through or because he already was going to do this, because he does have connections to Israel before this. He went the Gaza peace plan support. He really aggressively drove that to this very moment, ongoing. Bottom line, guys, this is the guy that was never experienced through DOGE, is now in a central position to be, I guess, driving through $30 million support for a foreign government at your expense, taxpayers. Sound like America first to you? Now, I'm going to include some articles that we discussed on this so you can check it out if you want to go back and look how, and also just to make a point for people that are new to the show, that if you haven't heard of what we've been doing or what TLAV is doing in general, then there's a reason for that. And ask yourself why, for how in-depth and how nuanced and sourced we've been covering every topic you could possibly think of. And I pretty much mean that. There's probably plenty of things we haven't touched on regularly, but I mean, you name a topic, I imagine we've touched on at one point or another. And DOGE, we've talked about a lot. The DOGE sleight of hand back from February of 2025. The DOGE deep state, March of 2025. And then this was from Derek, DOGE is efficiency a gateway to technocracy. See how many times we're being proven to be correct with what's now happening? And that's not trying, I mean, you could say it's patting myself on the back, but it's true. You can look for yourself. Our track record speaks for itself. And I shouldn't shy away from pointing that out. We've been insanely, consistently correct about a ton of stuff that you can go back and look for yourself. And that's not because we're guessing or because we're leaning into partisanship. It's because we're taking our time and being objective and looking to the source material and looking at the precedents and the outcomes and weighing our current situation. Not that hard to do unless you're blinded by partisanship. Efficiency, a gateway to technocracy. Yes, it feels that way. DOGE secrecy surveillance, May 25th. And you'll find out how clear this is if you watch through it. It's only being verified more today. And the point that was about the involved in the background, the lack of ethics pledges, the Israel connections, more DOGE fraud right on the surface, by the way, April 13th. And then, of course, where it really went, guys, the impending future of AI government. But who controls the AI? This is really what this was about. As even Reuters just showed you, that was their second tenet. They don't even really talk about making it AI government, right? And that's not the same as AI governance, which is using AI to sort of manage things. We're talking about having an AI one of the things I considered is whether DOGE was the trial balloon for an actual AI program that would govern. That may have well been what it was, and things just didn't work out. I mean, it's hard to know for sure. There were parts of that, the GSO, or not that. Which one was it? I think that was it. Anyway, I just want to misreport it. There numerous large government agencies with billion, or I think some of them $1 million budgets, were already using these little bots they created, which we already know how that connects and how much that's influenced. And of course, two more points I wanted just to make sure you saw before we get into some Twitter overlap, censorship, and get into the meat of the show today. David Icke just put this out. quoting what the general said, which was FBI Director Kash Patel has concluded their investigation into the Trump assassination attempt, finding that Thomas Crooks acted entirely alone. You know, completely confounding all the evidence and what everyone in his base actually thinks and, you know, everything else. But, you know, hashtag winning. But yeah, this is what continues to happen. And on top of that, and don't forget, as we just talked about, Candace Owens, here's an article from KUTV.com. Surveillance video of Charlie Kirk murder suspect suddenly missing from the sheriff's office. Surprise, surprise. She says, you honestly can't make this up. Footage of Tyler Robinson turning himself into the police doesn't exist. So if you were ever wondering whether or not this guy might not even be real, as much as that may sound insane, every day there's more indication that at the very least, that there's something obviously going on. Whether they're trying to hide something, maybe he was just a Republican, and it was very easy to prove, and that's what's been hidden the whole time. I don't think that's what it is. Just making an example to make you broaden out your scope because we tend to focus what we think, right? But maybe he was just a government construct that was made up with other people that they paid to say things and did it for this very reason. Look at what happened after it. Now, I'm not even saying that's what I think, but obviously we shouldn't be afraid to consider something like that because other people pretend that they know that's wrong and act like you're childish for thinking about it, even though we can prove it's happened in the past. You know, it's just the adults in the room are very quickly being seen for what they really are. The children, to be quite honest, the people that are hiding from the reality. And the point is we should not be blindly jumping into any of it because we don't know that's for sure, but we should be considering all of it. What do you know? Like, question everything. Surprise, surprise. But he points out this as well and says, David Icke says, joke, just like Tyler Robinson then. Nothing to see here. Move along. I mean, are we just going to pretend like we don't obviously know about what's going on with his ear? You know, we've talked about this. And it's insane, the kind of purity test and like gatekeeping that's going on today in the partisan media. But I mean, I've never said I knew exactly what happened. I mean, it's just as likely that it really was a piece of shrapnel that nicked him or something, and they made a big story about it to make himself look like something else. But you just can't ignore the facts, guys. You can't, like any munitions expert was telling you, even a shot that went close to his ear would have been bruised, there would have burning, there would have been cut. It's just not what happened, you know? And so it's wild that we live in this time where we can literally prove, like, not that what happened, but what didn't because of how clear it is. And yet we just fall into the partisan games, or everyone sees it and the screamers online are being pointed to like they're everybody, and we somehow can't see through that. It's a fascinating time. And even more so when we get into this conversation, almost kind of the same point. As somebody says, I almost kind of want to jump to the end. I think that's, where was that? There's a point, somebody, I want to say it now because it's on my mind. One of the people said very aptly about this. It's like, this is like the Nigerian prince manipulation that we all just fell for again on Twitter. It's actually really ridiculous that we can't, you know, but I think the point is everyone out there, I think, is for the most part capable of thinking maybe this person online is not what they seem. Like, it's a very obvious thing, but we don't factor it in. All of us at some points when we're reading things online. I mean, I've talked about it on the show before where I get in, I'm on Twitter and I'm grabbing things and I get frustrated. Like, why does everybody think this? And then I go, well, that's right. That's not even what I think. I don't even think that. I don't believe everybody thinks this. And yet you fall into it. You know, that's how propaganda works. But see, being aware of it, conscious of it, and trying to check yourself all the time is really the only antidote, because we will all fall into these traps sometime. If you're questioning everything and looking for them, you usually find your way out. He said to the news, X is now rolling out a feature that purports to show a country user where they're based in. Now, this is from the 21st. We're going to go through all this happened since. He says, for now, this only appears to be visible to the account owner. That's just right on the day. I think at that point, that day, it actually rolled out. And he says, for some users, there was a weird thing right in the beginning. It says a warning icon appears next to their alleged location, basically saying it may not be accurate. Now, I think that came about because of what we're about to show you. He just happened to catch these in real time. The point was it rolled out, and everyone's waiting for this, right? We want to find out if that guy's actually from a bot in Africa or a bot in China or whatever it is, right? So first, I'm sure you've all seen this. I want you to actually just see the video because it's a real time, just showing you scroll. This guy just simply clicks on Homeland Security and checks the joined July 2008, and it literally says Israel. See, July 2008. Well, first of all, let me pause real quick. The point is, it's account based in Israel is what it says. And the joined date was July 2008 in Israel. So that's pretty, I don't know how you disregard that. Sure, you can call it a glitch, but there's a lot of other things we're going to get to that pretty much show that this was something. Whatever that something is, this was something. Whether that means it's managed by Israel or whether they just happen to make that account while they were in Israel. I mean, I don't know. We shouldn't assume. But it does very clearly, in and of itself, speak volumes, doesn't it? And this iHypocrite says the official DHS account was revealed to have been created in Israel. I saw a screenshot of this and assumed it was a joke. But apparently, it's real and confirmed by Grok. And it was. Grok's been responding and saying, yes, like this person says, this is fake news. Location was not available. That's wrong. It's not true. And I can show you this very clearly. But see, this is what they do in real time. They flood the zone. They lie and they deceive and they give you other, this is by design to make you doubt yourself, which you always should be questioning, but don't just fall into the bait, the traps. But the point is that he says the geolocating features were disabled shortly after going live. Now, I very well saw it and was like, okay, that's probably somebody lying about that, which there are some examples of that. I can show you that. But to be clear, this is very much what happened because the way they responded to it makes that case for itself. Now, this is what somebody else did. They took a screenshot of it. Same information, right? So he did it live on the show. So did a few other people. Here is their account, which, by the way, let's just for a brief moment make fun of how childishly ridiculous these people are. This is literally what the Homeland Security DHS Gov account posted. Get me to the based department. I mean, it's like a bunch of 40-year-old men in a room. Like, what do they think is cool? What do those guys think is cool? Yeah, that's hip, man. Go with that word. That's the base department. Like, I'm embarrassed for them, to be honest. But that's how dumb they think we are. And guess what? The funniest part is the people we always point to are they're going, yeah, based. We're cool. That's pretty insulting. But it says mass migration poses a threat. It's just about the idea. And what many pointed out was they didn't say illegal immigration. They just said mass migration, which I don't even disagree with. Mass migration absolutely has very serious side effects, but that's not to say that it's a threat to every, there's different points to be made. And realistically, mass migration is almost, in my experience, manufactured, whether the Venezuela, hordes or whatever they called them, or the very real example of Israel manufacturing migration to manipulate other countries, or what even from Syria, how that was managed and very clearly used. This is what they've done. This be clear, regardless of the point, mass migration very much does pose you could say threat, or you could say just very clear consequences and side effects. But that's not the point today, because I've made my points clear on how weaponized migration is a real thing, but mostly being driven by the very people that are screaming about it, or on top of that don't even really care about it when it comes down to the real agenda. But Homeland Security account, now it says, joined 2008 and the United States, which I find interesting. Because, it says, I didn't see this. The country or region that the account is based in can be impacted by travel. Yeah, so now they're watering it down as best they can. So what's the point? If you can, which I said at the beginning before it came out, if you can use a VPN, then what was the big? They were trying to make this as if it was going to show everything, right? But the reason this is interesting is because they still have it say on the United States, right? I mean, you'll see why this is important. So, Janice Girl pointed out that after everybody saw that, they shut it down, like instantly. Just like this has happened at least 3 times in my experience. H-1B visas, I think it was one around Venezuela election time, where they literally, or it was South Africa genocide. They shut down Grok, or they shut down very clearly just instantly pulled it and then put it back out. Hey, we're fixed. They're doing that with Grok all the time. She says, X activated locations last night, which showed the U.S. government accounts like DHS opened and operating from Israel. Then 20 minutes later, they deactivated the feature. That's the best way to frame that. The U.S. government accounts being opened and then operated from Israel. Now, that doesn't have to mean anything other than that Israel has been allowed to manage these accounts, which is what I think we're all starting to understand. Whether that's actually what's happening or not, the representation there is that this government is being manipulated, if not run, from a foreign power. So, here's what came out from Twitter. X glitch. I even love that they use the word glitch because it's just perfect for what we talk about. Briefly places DHS account in Tel Aviv. Okay, it wasn't just this one account. There were many examples, and the fact that they tried to go oopsie, okay, well, explain to us how that oopsie came to pass. It says the mishap happened during the early rollout of this account tool, which aimed to show transparency through details like country of origin and app store. Screenshots showed DHS tied to Israel, including in 2008 joined there. Though the agency operates from Washington, D.C., X's Grok explained it as a temporary glitch, not the first time, by the way, from IP signals or activity patterns, and the platform soon limited access to account owners only. DHS has not commented while the incident underscores hurdles in verifying location accuracy. Now, Grok originally said yes, that is, then they changed it, then Grok went away, and it all comes back, and everything's on the up and up. That's how this has gone every single time. Now, Twitter reactivated the whole process. Okay, so here's what ultimately, aside from DHS and whether you think that's important, I do, what is still apparent. That's what I'm trying. That's the thing. I think the real thing to show is that that is happening, whether DHS or not. And let's show you what is still currently in front of you. As Alex points out, this is crazy. And I mean, it is insane to me, even to me. How many? And I've gone through these today. How many of these large accounts, save for like, I think it was Cat Turd and Eagle Guntherman and these other, like these ones that are, you know, I mean, look, no, like I was going to say no more. That's going to sound funny. My point, what I was going to try to say, and the sentence sounded bad in my head, is that Cat Turd and Eagle Guntherman, for example, are very pro-America, right, on the front, but no more or less than the rest of them. All the rest of these accounts are like, yes, America, free speech, America first, Civil War. Like, that's what they're pushing. What you're going to find out is most of them are from other countries. There's no way you make sense of that. You're not calling for America first and, you know, talking about the revolution in 1776 if you're from China or India, which is what we're going to find out. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to that. But so Cat Turd and the other ones, for example, I think are just some people that operate from the United States, but are the same propaganda. But this is MAGA Nation. Within most of these, I think this is one of them, has like 2 million followers. Eastern Europe. Now, look, you can be a part. Like, let's be clear about this. Even when we get to things like the Gaza part or Mamdani, is that you can be part of MAGA Nation and believe in MAGA and support Trump and be from anywhere in the world. It's not that we're talking about. It's that if you look at the content of these accounts, they're very much one and will state in their content that they're from the United States and that they're a Republican and that they vote for Trump. They do it every day and they're lying. They're not from the United States. They don't live in the United States. This is what's important to understand. And they're doing this either because they're being paid to do it because of some other propaganda outlet, you know, like a Israel thing or just a Republican group that's doing it, or because the U.S. government is doing it. That's what I really believe. And I think it's very obvious because this is much bigger than just left versus right paradigm stuff, guys. The bots, and I mean, this is where we get into the fake or dead internet theory. The realistic thing to consider that maybe it's been so overtaken by so many reinforcing bot networks, and whether it's just like bots that give you the weather that day, which is not necessarily nefarious, or the bots that are out there acting like the people online, that the majority of the internet are bots. That's not hard to prove. This is MAGA Scope, Nigeria. The MAGA Beacon, South Asia. There's tons of these guys. And this is just to show you that you can still prove this right now. This is the MAGA Nation. That's Eastern Europe. Here's what the account was. This one's 392,000 followers. Still very influential. Micah simply says they're literally all foreigners because everyone was pointing this out. This is another one of these very pro, Trump supporting his conscious philosopher. This one was from Serbia. Now, here's what's even more telling, guys. He deleted the post. You know what the post said? I'll show you because I was able to get it on the way back machine. The reason he deleted it is because he's from Serbia. The account was created in Serbia. But here's what he was saying. In the American Civil War, Confederates were the good guys. Okay, and let's be clear. You could still say that and not be from the United States. But if you look at the content, they're driving the Civil War division. They're driving the pro-Trump MAGA, Democrats are terrorists, and very much representing themselves as from this country. This is very important. Oh, and then you can do it for yourself. Like I'm just trying to show you guys can still do this. It's all still public. Now, this was interesting to me. I asked Grok, which I bet you will change by tomorrow, or like how often these things are like updated to hide something. Give me the top 20 MAGA accounts that were exposed as foreign operated on Twitter. Surprisingly, it came back pretty strong. And you won't be surprised. Ivanka News has 1 million followers. That's from Nigeria. And to be clear, these are groups that are exposed as being foreign operated when they're front facing as American MAGA Trump supporters. Ivanka News. Fan Trump Army is from South Asia, likely Bangladesh. MAGA Nation, 400,000 followers, Eastern Europe. Defiant L's. We've seen this accounts from Japan. And again, the point is they represent themselves as Americans in most of these cases. MAGA Scope, 200,000, Nigeria. Dark MAGA Coin, 150,000, Thailand. American Patriot, 143,000, Chile. America First, Bangladesh. It's MAGA News, India. It's crazy. And by the way, for those maybe new, all of this, everything I point to and talk about is linked when I'm done with the show in the source material. So you guys can check it. You can verify it, come to your own conclusions about it, hopefully. Derek Sentis says half the population of the U.S. This was the one. Half the population of the U.S. fell, well, really all of us to a degree, fell for what is, in fact, just the newest iteration of the Nigerian prince trying to move some diamonds. Or like, I've got $200 million that I have to give away before I lose it, or some ridiculous scam like that. Here are the heroes and champions of your white Christian ethno-state MAGA, right? Here's Ian Miles Chong from UAE, Ultra MAGA Trump, Nigeria, MAGA Scope, again, Nigeria, America First, Bangladesh. Kills me. Laura Loomer, she says, what have I been telling you? All foreign bots. A foreign psyop to destroy MAGA. Oh, is that what it is? Right, okay. You're talking about people that are coming in literally saying identical things to you. And so if your point is that what you're doing is destroying MAGA, then I don't actually disagree. But what's hilarious to me is she's literally just trying to misrepresent what this showed, because that's what they do. And if you're that exposed, what else can you do? But she says, thank you, whoever this person is. Oh, of course it is. Head of product of X, Nikita Beer, says, thank you for finally allowing everyone to see the truth. Except for the fact that literally 90,000, you could use a VPN that could alter that. As they said, you could just be in the wrong place when these things happen. They're literally going, it doesn't prove anything. And yet here they are going, it proves everything, because they're trying. And while the information actually shows the opposite of what they're pointing to. This is just straight desperation, guys. Blakely says, the funny thing is it mostly exposed fake MAGA patriots living in Macedonia and Indians pretending to be Israelis. True. In other words, this was all for your benefit. Because again, all of these accounts are literally spewing the information that they support. Anti-Muslim, pro-Israel, like pretend free speech while censoring for anti-Semitism. It's what they all do. And this is the most clear examples. So Nick's order comes out while all this is happening. And I urge you to all go do this for yourself. And do it in cases where it's somebody who is very clearly representing themselves as an American, as a MAGA Trump supporter, and then being from somewhere else. Not, for example, Alex Soros, who I very much do not trust and think is part of the problem, having an account in Nigeria. What does that even prove? These people are globalist manipulators that go all around the world and manipulate things all the time. And so, as he says, what the F? Why is George Soros' son in Nigeria? He's just trying to deflect. Look at that. It doesn't even prove anything. Maybe he was in Nigeria when it started. He's not representing to be not from Nigeria or from anywhere else. Like, it just seems such a ridiculous thing to do, right? And he says they've given, and then wait, this says, zero changes. He says they've given Democrats, given their Democrats, it wouldn't surprise me if they had African slaves running their accounts. I mean, guys, these people are so ridiculous. I just don't even understand it unless it literally is just a massive gaslighting operation and everyone just laughs at people like Nick Sorter, which wouldn't surprise me. I mean, this is the kind of thing they're putting out. It wouldn't surprise me. So great journalism to go jump into a completely projected lie to bolster the thing that isn't even important in a conversation about you trying to lie about MAGA people being from another country. It's embarrassing, guys. The guy that got caught in Lahaina using people's donations to stay in a 5-star hotel live on the War Room Bannon show and basically started the cry. These people get promoted because they're manipulators. The bottom line, though, Alex Soros and the Soros Global, Open Society Foundation are not things that we should be trusting. But it's important to recognize what he's trying to do right here. Okay, Cat Turd says, I think we're all figuring out that almost all our trolls are foreigners pretending to be Americans. Even more sly, I'll give you that. You mean the ones pretending to be your people? All right, so what he's trying to do right there is make you assume that they're people that you guys are making, like the Democrats faking to attack us. No, he's literally pointing out, and the trolls are not for you. These are MAGA people that go, you're the best, Cat Turd. They'll share what you say. Look for yourselves. Look at everyone pointing to and look at the way they engage with these very accounts. So he's just trying to deflect and act like what we just discovered was the opposite of what's actually happening. And people beneath him and that follow him go, you're right. I knew I shouldn't trust what they were saying online. That's what happens. Gunther Eagleman, both of which, by the way, you can look and at least their accounts say the United States, which could mean anything, VPN. But I mean, what it makes sense to me that these people would probably be from the United States. And it says breaking. Panic has erupted, he reports, amongst the left as their foreign bot farms are exposed. Well, you know what's funny to me is, as you know, I see this as a government thing. So he's half right. I think that the government's concerned that we're recognizing their ploy here, but it's not even what's happening. The vast majority of the conversation is recognizing what I just showed you. And you can look for yourself. I mean, look, it's funny. This is fantastic. I didn't even notice this. Look at this person. Look at these two tweets. Spencer Hakeman, breaking, panic has erupted amongst the, identical, the same capitalization. I'm willing to bet you, let's just do this real quick and check it out. Let's see for ourselves how prolific this might be. There's one of them. Oh, turns out that almost everything everyone has been arguing about this app has been foreign bots. Yeah, which we all know, by the way. Many of us have been talking about that. Breaking, X is shut down. I guess not many, but I figure that's weird. You know what's funny is how come we don't see his? Oh, there it is. Now it's at the top under latest for some reason. Here's another one. Breaking. Anyway, that he's trying to say the left is panicking. Now, I don't see it anywhere. Frankly, I see very few of the conversation being about left anything. Like, what's the argument? What is the left botting right now? Other than Israel and support for all the things you guys are fighting for, supporting the Ukraine war. It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not suggesting they don't. I'm suggesting the power structure is different right now. And ultimately, the left is quietly supporting what Trump is really doing in the most earnest sense about what the government's trying to accomplish. Well, they yell about wedge issues and pretend they're fighting each other. Here's a good one. Israeli Foreign Ministry, which again is actually the Israeli government account. 196,900 followers being lied to by fake journalists claiming to be in Gaza. Bombshell. New Twitter feature reveals he's actually in Poland. Reporting from Gaza is fake and not reliable. Makes you wonder why more fake accounts. Okay, bombshell. They proved it. Look at that screenshot. He's clearly from Poland, right? Well, here's his actual account. Or excuse me. Oh, did I close it? Hold on. Let me grab his account. It was ABU. Dang it. Hold on. Oh, it's right there. Okay, good. I accidentally closed it earlier when I was getting this shot. So here's his account. Okay, look at this. This is interesting. So, here's what's crazy to me. I'm like, this is actually important because I'm going to show you a video where he's literally filming in Gaza like yesterday and today. So the point is that this was altered again. So this earlier, when I looked at this said that he was in, where was that? God damn it. Oh, excuse me. I shouldn't have cussed. I just hate when this happens live because let me play the video for you. So what I'm thinking just happened is that Twitter is doing what they're doing, like we just proved to you, and altering things back and forth. But question that I might be wrong. This is what I think is most important. So I don't know how you would go about faking this. So they're claiming he's in Poland, right? Here's his video.
Good evening. For the people who claim that I am from Poland and I'm tweeting and posting from Poland, I just want to tell you that if you can recognize such buildings in Poland, just tell me please if you can recognize such tents and tent camps as you see here.
I mean, you get it. I don't know how, in what way anybody could discard this. If he's acknowledging the Poland point, which only came out yesterday into today, right? I mean, there's no way you could deny he's in Gaza, and so right now he is in Gaza filming that. And so for whatever reason, that thing is showing that he's in Poland, and that's not the reality. And so this is another example of how I honestly think that this thing is meant to be manipulated. Now, why that's ultimately showing, which we should question too, that the MAGA people are from other countries. That's what I made clear in the beginning, VPNs. But it's interesting to me that nonetheless, this has continued to come out and showing you all these people that are fronting as something else. So interestingly, going back to this. So again, I had it open before, which, yeah, exactly. VPN possibly. But regardless, the bottom line is Israel comes out and says he's actually from Poland. Now, let's be real. If what we just showed you, I mean, which we can quite literally prove that Israel is completely intertwined with XAI and Twitter, which is XAI, through BlackRock, through any number of overlapping points, directly involved CHEQ, Authentics, I mean, intelligence-wise. So it would not be difficult for this to be tweaked. But question me, guys. Question whether I'm wrong. The point is that they came out and said Israel that he's fake, he's not in Gaza, and then he literally, and Dropsite News shared it. For those who claim that I'm posting from Poland, here he is literally redressing today's coverage in Gaza. So it's just, this is the kind of stuff that we get, even maybe, because I could be wrong, to the level that you're watching them in real time alter it to make up their story. And again, the point is that Israel, which I may be getting to right here, now I think it's the next segment, Israel's been caught lying in so many ridiculously bombastic ways. More than Grok will tell you, but if you ask, which I'll show you in a minute, it gives you some of the most incredible examples, the beheaded babies, the multiple hospital bombings, by the way. Even Grok is telling you Israel got caught lying about those. And these are major deceptions that the U.S. government backed. Even if those were the only ones, it shows you they're willing to lie about massive war crimes. So you shouldn't be trusting or taking at face value anything they do, and always be considering whether or not that's what they're doing. That's just basic logic. I find this to be so insulting, right? Dropsite News doing great work. That's so interesting to me. I'm going to hold this back and come back at that. All right. So Jack Posobiec doing the same thing we showed you before. This person, King Henry, says, this is funny to me. Okay. So if you check this account called, which I'm not really that familiar with, Republicans Against Trump. And it's just so it's a claiming to be Republicans that are going after Trump, which we know there are, guys. Just being objective, I'm saying that, but there's tons of Republicans, even largely people that were recently in his base that are now not supporting him, including who just said that, Candace Owens, for crying out loud. But here's this one, United States. Okay. So again, VPN is very possible, right? But we don't know for sure. So here's the new media jumping in first as King Henry and says, isn't even American. He's using VPN. Okay. Well, the point is maybe you're wrong in assuming that. And Jack just goes, wow. What do you mean, wow? That this guy randomly says that and that you somehow assume because he knows that you can't verify that it must be a VPN, or he's in the United States. I mean, I'm not going to assume that. I just think this is hilarious. What they're doing. I mean, here's what it shows, guys. The picture simply goes, may not be accurate, which is what they're showing under every one of these posts now. And he thinks that somehow indicates that this one is not there and using a VPN. These people are mentally handicapped. I don't mean that in the sense of like even the word retarded just simply means held back. I don't mean that in the real sense. Like, these people are mentally withheld. How do you want to frame it? Like, there's a deficiency in these people. I don't know how else to frame that. They're either willfully deceiving themselves or willfully deceiving you. It's everywhere. I just think it's so wild how clear all of this is. Rabbi Paupko says the Gaza industrial complex racket has never been easier to expose. Okay. And he posts to this account that's pretending, which actually it's not. I don't think this account is even, there's a lot of these accounts that are reporting on Gaza, like I am. I don't think some of them are claiming to be from Gaza, but I don't want to say for sure. I haven't gone through everything in the account, but the post they're pointing to does not claim to be from Gaza. They're just reporting, as you can see, yesterday, which was true, by the way, that 20 Palestinians were killed in Gaza as they were claiming a ceasefire, right? So what's interesting, West Asia is where that would be. So yet again, you've got people who are either that stupid or that dishonest going, look, it says West Asia. Yeah, that's where Palestine would be, man. So you're just dumb. And that's Middle East is West Asia. You rat-faced human scum is what it says. I mean, I think this is stupidity. I really do. But this is where it goes. And this is the kind of thing that gets spread. This person says, tell me you don't know where Gaza is without telling me you don't know where Gaza is. This person responds by saying, whoa, this is a new one. The grifter in Turkey and claims to be in Gaza. Oh, it's Rami Abdul. The guy who runs the Euromed Human Rights Group that says he's in Turkey. Look at that. The screenshot, absolute, right? Except for when you actually go to it, it says West Asia, which is where he is, which is in Palestine. So all these examples. Now, again, I was kind of worried this would be altered again. Let's go back. I had it up still. Let's find out if they changed that one. And that would make my point if it happened. No, it didn't. Okay. West Asia, which you can do your due diligence if you don't somehow know that that's what that refers to. Now, that doesn't mean Palestine. It just means that larger body of, that continent. But that is where that would be if he was in Palestine. And this guy is very much what he represents. Rami Abdul is the chairman of the Euromed Human Rights Group. And that's why they hate him. But just to recognize yet again that these people are just absolutely, they're just adding on, look, fake. And that goes around the conversation. Oh, and then one more good point to add. This totally USA group fighting for American interest is absolutely based in Israel, again, according to this. But I find it hard to believe they would use a VPN to claim they were in a country that they don't want you to think they're in. Right? So you have to take this with a grain of salt, but it's interesting nonetheless. Batar USA, Batar Worldwide, is a group that's been threatening Americans with deportation, threatening Americans with pagers, claiming they're good at. I mean, this is a terrorist group. And I don't mean that in a light sense. These people have literally conducted terrorist attacks, and their account's based in Israel. And it was joined in the Israel App Store. So based in Israel and conducted out of Israel and operating in the United States as a U.S. entity. Well, it's not that surprising, seeing as how that's exactly what AIPAC is. Now, overlapping this with stuff on Twitter and Infiltration to sort of make that clear, this was just one example of, I think, an accidental admission showing you that Israel is working its way through everything we're dealing with. So actually, let me show you this one first, and I'll play this clip. I just showed you this the other day, Red Pill Media. And this is true. Grok even responded, acknowledging it. Twitter deleted Hebrew translations from Jewish people online because they were calling for genocide. It's literally going, kill everybody, the children, terrible things. I've shown you plenty. Randy Fine in Congress says things like that every day. We'll get to that in a minute. This person asked Grok, and it says translation from Hebrew was disabled because it often amplified inflammatory, policy-violating content. Oh, so instead of deleting it like you do and pushing off the platform like you do for everybody else, you just quietly remove the translation so Americans couldn't see it? That's just simply dishonesty. And it says, hey, Grok, have you done that for any other languages? And it says, to my knowledge, no, only for Hebrew. And it says, they asked for Arabic, or it says, has not been disabled for Arabic or anything else. So by that very point, whether it's the honest truth or not, what that suggests is that the Hebrew conversation is much more inflammatory than the Arabic conversation. Now, I don't believe that's what it shows. This is just one Twitter point, but I do believe that's what the world is representing right now. I think it's very obvious. There's only one group openly committing genocide and absolutely supporting that. I don't mean Jews. I mean Zionists, but largely who speak Hebrew in Israel, by the way. Here is a clip I just played. Oh, well, this one more point. This is a clip I'm going to get to. But this is just to bolster the point again. I mean, what we're showing you, it's not just on Twitter, guys. Literally, as Gen X pointed out, look at this. These Israelis are walking through the halls of Congress, openly demanding things and threatening people in Congress. I played it for you yesterday before yesterday. These guys are Israeli foreign entities who are there literally walking through and posting basically threats on the doors of these people and yelling at other people in the halls of Congress. I mean, if they were Chinese government entities, would that be okay or even be allowed? It just doesn't make any sense until you realize what this really represents. And this clip will make that very clear. As Carrie Burgess points out, the U.S. has woken up to the fact that Israel is controlling U.S. politics and its mainstream media. Judging by social media, there's a terrible backlash coming. The best outcome Israel can hope for is that they're going to be on their own. The worst is that the U.S. turns against them, which the people have. The government, that's what it looks like for them to do what I've been saying the entire time. For them to, at some point, unless it's just the Epstein blackmail, which is probably what we're dealing with, they'll recognize that their interest, it's more in their interest as politicians to not be with Israel than it is to blindly support them, because you'll get more support from everybody else versus them, even though they'll try to take you out. That was not a joke. But this is what they've done for a very long time.
Decided to set up permanent institutional structures to control how Americans would think about the Middle East. In 1983, Israel launched the Hasbara project, the aim of which was to ensure good press in the U.S. media. The goal was to train Israeli diplomats in communications and public relations. For example, they trained press officers in Israeli consulates in the U.S. to ensure that American journalists would write stories favorable to Israel. As one of these press officers said in the 1980s, he had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with journalists, and that a typical day would involve conversations with producers at leading news and TV talk shows about the content of the program. He described it as, in fact, quote, a joint formulation of ideas. This targeting of the American media goes on in the present day.
The abuse against a journalist is something you just have to take into account. If you both literally.
For the podcast, that's Robert Fisk, right? One of the people that was in Syria from The Independent at the time, who was breaking down that they were lying to you about the chemical attacks and that it wasn't actually the Syrian government. It's just, if you really take a step back, and especially if you haven't been doing this very long or like caring about Paul, you go back and look at some of this stuff, it'll blow your mind how many times these kind of things have happened and how people still are blinded to it.
And metaphorically, If you work in the Middle East, you've got to take the sticks and stones. What I object to is that my American colleagues don't seem to be prepared to do that.
And even in Israel itself, you know, you can find the main daily newspapers, like Haaretz, for example, provides coverage on the ground and analysis, some of which has views on the conflict that that would be almost beyond the pale for an American journalist, say at the New York Times, to write.
The main major television news networks and newspapers in the United States have long ago got their fear to be supreme over their duties as journalists. They are not monitoring the centers of power when it comes to the relationship between America and the Middle East, Israel and America and the Arabs and the Palestinians. They will not ask the right questions. They will not report it using the correct words. They will not confront the reality, and they've given up. And I think once you acquire fear, it's very difficult to get rid of it.
Exactly. Just don't know how we disregard things like that. Here's a post I want to include in this segment. Wally Rashid pointed this out. In 1984, the U.S. was negotiating a free trade agreement with Israel. A classified memo listed American industries that would be harmed if duties were removed. AIPAC then stole the document and sent it to Israeli officials to hurt America's economy while benefiting Israel. You know, just another day in their special relationship. And this person says it's unbelievable how much hard evidence exists of Israel's active espionage on the United States. You don't think that's true? It takes half a second to look this up on Google, for crying out loud, and you will get a waterfall of information showing you not just the USS Liberty, but things you probably never heard about. If all this damning evidence is readily available, one can only imagine the magnitude of the evidence they're fighting tooth and nail to keep hidden. It's a very good point. Now, this came out recently. Of course, I'm going to play a clip that you might expect in a second. Tamir, this is a web developer from Gaza, reports that explosion of a modern smartphone inside a store in Nusrat in the central Gaza Strip. Now, of course, there's no way to verify that, but at this point, we know this is what's happened with the pager attack. I think this is exactly what we're all worried about, that this is where this is at, or maybe has been for a really long time. And so I simply pointed out what Netanyahu just said at the 50 States One Israel conference in Israel, where 250 members of Congress sat there while Netanyahu spoke to them about what they need to do and say. And one thing he pointed out, for no apparent reason, was that, you know, we make everything from cell phone things, which, by the way, you all have a piece of Israel in your pocket. Yeah, now that might not sound concerning to you until you start to think about what we just reported and modern smartphones and what that means and how Israel has very verifiably infiltrated U.S. tech. And especially considering the Lebanon pager attack and what that really verifies. And Tiberius simply said, this is why they let smartphones into Gaza. They did. Gaza is testing ground for instruments of death, and their use won't be limited to Gaza. That's for sure, which we've seen before. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And so, time to think about this clip yet again. Hopefully, for those that haven't seen it, this will open some doors in your mind. Now, this is Israel's interview that was set up by the Israeli government with 60 Minutes to address the attack on Lebanon with those pagers. So you could argue that they're lying, but at the very least, Israel wants you to think that this is what they're doing. And you can separate from that, prove that this is what they're doing.
You convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
Right. So if that was anybody but Israel, that would be called terrorism. That would be called, you know, obviously espionage. You're literally infiltrating foreign governments, and you're creating companies pretending to be American companies or whatever country you're in, and then using those to manipulate the host country for the benefit of Israel. It's exactly what he just said, to manipulate the supply chain in our favor. It's an open admission of exactly what we're always talking about. And every time I play it, I'm baffled about how we're still debating this. So Derek wrote an excellent series, by the way. The third part came out recently called The Technocratic Trump Administration. Here's the main page to the series. 3 parts are included. The public-private partnership, part 1, part 2, pressuring and consolidating the media, part 3, the technocratic Trump administration, the Zionist infiltration expands. And it's just it's the deeper overlap of the two, but the point is the infiltration. Zionist, technocracy, globalism, at this point, they're the same thing as far as I can tell. The new Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States, November 2024. Sadly, it becomes more and more obvious every day. Now, the overlap of this is an interesting point with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the interesting dip in Trump support, which I think is completely explainable. But first, this point, which is interesting. Now, I've talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene more than once. Now, my points were simple. I say the same thing with Massey. Massey is somebody who continually shows me that he's at least wanting you to see that he's standing by his principles for a very long time. I only say it like that because, as I said many times in the past, I'm very jaded when it comes to politics and government because literally everything in front of you shows you should be. That's just, they've lied to you every single time for as far back as you want to look about everything. I mean, literally with the left-right paradigm, I mean, it's infuriating. And I think we all know that. The joke is, how do you know a politician's lying? Their lips are moving. And we're like, yeah, we're all being lied to. Or Bruce Fein will tell you that they literally all have ulterior motives. He's worked with the bottom line is it's always been that way. And so I'm not going to trust any of them because I think that's not in our interest. And I don't think anybody anywhere ever should trust or have loyalty to a politician. I think that's counterintuitive. It doesn't even make sense to me because if that's the case, then at some point you may be misled, even if they are misled with not intending to mislead you. Don't you want to be on guard for that? I mean, it's what we've always seen. So when it comes to Massey, for example, I support what he's doing, and I constantly point to what I think he's doing. I'd love to interview him because I'd like to talk about that and maybe even reassure myself that he's actually what he shows himself to be. But I'm going to be extremely critical, more so of somebody that I think might be doing the right thing for that very reason. That's all to say that even somebody like him, that's just to counterbalance that with the Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I think is, at least recently been doing a lot of good things of support in regard to like Israel and pushing back in a partisan way when it seems that's her principle. I respect that, even if we disagree on politics. But I felt very clearly for a while that either that she is doing that to her benefit, which I'll still point to and say good, but opportunism, or that there's, that my point in that would be that it's sort of a manipulation by design, or part of it is that we just have different opinions on things. And that she genuinely thinks that the lefties are terrorists because she said that. Very much a part of the left terrorism, lefties are all bad kind of a mindset. She made that point many times, which to me, that's just a blatant manipulation, but maybe she feels that way. So that's all to say that what she's doing now might very well prove that she is what she claims to be. I would say that if she ends up never coming back to politics. Sadly, it sort of seems confounding. This is the way it looks, because right now, if she never comes back to politics, I think that would prove to me that she was likely, at least in some way, genuine, or she was scared about what's going to happen, what we'll point to next. But at the same time, part of me thinks that this is a ploy for her presidency run, which if I had to pick right now, that's what my gut's telling me, that she's simply going to run for president. And this is her way, because you got to pull out of Congress anyway. This is her way to gain sympathy, and But I'm mixed because I think what she says here is fantastic. I really agree with most of it. But just again, right now, I'm even saying that I think people would get offended, and that's the problem, isn't it? Why would you have loyalty or team sport following to a politician? We should. Like I said, even if you believe in her, you should be the one going, I'm going to be very critical to make sure she's what we want. The idea that you would pull punches for somebody because they're what you want, it seems completely ridiculous to me. It's counterintuitive. So I'm going to play the short clip that play a part that he said here. But all of this is to say that I think that she pointing this out is important because she's calling out what Israel's doing, and that's making a really difficult time for Trump and what his administration is doing at a low point for their support. And what happens next will really more so define what this really is and whether it's genuine. And now, other than a presidential run, it might just be something that she may shift into a different position of political influence, things are changing, right? But let me play the clip. As Shadow of Ezra points out, Marjorie Taylor Greene is stepping down from Congress. That's what she's reporting. And that's what the statements have been in the videos, warning Americans that, quote, there is no plan to save the world and no 4D chess being played, which is exactly, by the way, what Michael Flynn just put out too. I'll point to that in a second, insisting that both parties have betrayed the people. I absolutely agree with that. She says she's never changed, but broke with her party over H-1B visas. I agree. The AI takeover. I agree. 50-year mortgages, ending foreign wars, demanding full release of Epstein files. That's my point. 100%. I agree with all of that. But there's partisanship points that I can't get past. That's why I said to begin with that maybe she just believes that. So I won't allow that to make it like from my stance. Some people do believe that left is one thing, right is another thing. And, like in a government sense. And so I'm not going to allow that to make me think, like if somebody believes genuinely what they believe and they're wrong, I don't use that to think negatively of them. Other than I just feel like they may be missing things that I think are obvious. But I think that's an important way to look at it because people tend to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and be like a shill or just because they disagree, which interestingly is sort of what Trump is doing to her. Where, as she points out, she's largely supported what he's done, other than very specific votes that he didn't like. And now all of them act like she's a traitor, like Massey too, even though he's more adherent to the Republican Party line than Trump is. Now, here is her clip, and he says, Green adds that no foreign country has any business influencing the halls of Congress. Again, I agree.
Through it all, I never changed or went back on my campaign promises and only disagreed in a few areas, like my stance against H-1Bs replacing American jobs, AI state moratoriums, debt for life 50-year mortgage scams, standing strongly against all involvement in foreign wars, and demanding the release of the Epstein files. Other than that, my voting record has been solidly with my party and the president. Loyalty should be a two-way street, and we should be able to vote our conscience and represent our district's interests because our job title is literally representative.
Okay. Loyalty is a two-way street. Well, again, it may just be a difference of how we view the world. But why in the world loyalty is not, the idea is that means that you support them. That at the end of the day, you're loyal to Trump, even if he turns out he's been lying to you, or, that's what that ultimately means. And that's what they're saying. You have to be loyal to him. And she's not being loyal. But at the same time, playing into the two-party loyalty kind of concept, doesn't that feel weird? Because from her perspective, wouldn't that be the exact opposite? That right now they're demanding loyalty from you, even though you have been, doing the right thing and pushing back on Trump. So it's a weird statement, isn't it? I mean, I just find that confounding. But other than that, I pretty much agree with everything she says.
America first should mean America first and only Americans first, with no other foreign country ever being attached to America first in our halls of government.
Yep.
Standing up for American women who were raped at 14 years old, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for.
Yeah.
However, while yes, hurtful, my heart remains filled with joy, my life is filled with happiness, and my true convictions remain unchanged because my self-worth is not defined by a man, but instead by God who created everything in existence.
Well, good. I really do appreciate that, if that is genuinely what she believes, that there's respect there, that she is standing by her principles, even if I may disagree with some of them, and that she's so adherent to them that she's willing to to leave her position because she doesn't want to challenge that. Now, I respect that more than anything, like I've said more than once. And so if that stands to be true, big respect for her. That's important to think about, right? But as the next, I guess over the next probably 5 years, that's a long time, but we coming to the next election, we'll probably know for sure. But I also will argue that how she gets involved after this on shows, that'll speak something to it as well. Now here is just her longer post. It's 10 minutes long. You can watch the whole thing. I'll include that for you. Dana McAdams responded to what Trump said about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is kind of what she's responding to. He said, Marjorie Trader Brown, just a child, because of plummeting poll numbers and not wanting to face a primary challenger with a strong Trump endorsement, has decided to call it quits. Right. So instead of, taking the high road and just a win, essentially, because she's out of the way, you kick her while she's down because you're weak. That's what weak people do. That is not necessary. You know what I mean? Like, so he makes, she only quit because we're too strong for her. And what that shows you is weakness. If you really understand how these things work. And it says her relationship with the worst. Now, to be clear, I'm not necessarily talking about strength or any one particular thing, but it is a form of weakness as a person to be so cowardly and so, insecure, really, and narcissistic to feel the need to do that. For someone, by the way, who did support him very blindly for a long time. I shouldn't even say blindly because clearly she's standing, but just hardcore supported him for a long time. And he goes on to say her relationship with the worst Republican congressman, Lindsey Graham? No, Thomas Massey. The guy who's more adherent to the Republican voting line than Trump. The worst Republican congressman. I mean, this is why he's losing like a waterfall support right now. And he goes, Massey, also known as Rand Paul Jr., the guy secondarily beneath Massey, the next person in line to be the most principled, in my opinion anyway. And it says, did not help her. For some reason, primarily that I refused to return her never-ending barrage of phone calls. You see? Small. Even whether it's true or not, it probably is. Whether, like maybe he was involved with those calls. But just now it's a slight to see she was constantly trying to get my attention. I wouldn't give it to her because I'm so much bigger and better and strong. You're small, man. That's small. That's insecurity. It says Marjorie went bad. Well, no, really. I mean, she's very much more in line with what I argue is the right path and most Americans can see. Nevertheless, I will always appreciate Marjorie and thank her for her service. Are you kidding me? That is almost worse because of the way he ended that. And Daniel McAdams says, this is so beneath the office of presidency. This is what I mean about decorum. It would be unseemly even if it was an attack on a Republican or the representative of the opposing party, but to treat a loyal member of your party this way speaks volumes about your character. Exactly. Now, Massey responded to this, and this Rachel Scott just spoke with President Trump on the phone. He said Marjorie Taylor Greene's resigning, which is great news for the country. That's what he said. I think it's great news for the country. It's great. He asked if she gave any heads up, and he says, nah, it doesn't matter. I think it's great. I think she should be happy. Small. And Massey says, no, this was not great news for the country. And Gen X Girl points out that every goon is out there selling all the ones you might expect. Laura Loomer, Randy Fine, Donald Trump commentary, Brendan Dilley. They're all out there going, yay, she's so gross, even though 10 seconds ago they were screaming about how she would save the planet, or anybody Trump alluded to is somehow the best thing in the world until suddenly they're not. Candace Owens, communications from Trump admin be like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a traitor for demanding a convicted child rapist have his files released. But we're standing by Mike Huckabee, who met with an treasonous Israeli spy, Jonathan Pollard, which, as we reported in the last show, is very much what's happening. That there's just no misunderstanding that. And not even just because it is really, mind you, just because a spy, like that is somebody you're siding with somebody who is secretly meeting with a traitor, or rather more so a spy working for Israel, but pretended to be inside the American. And the point being that is somebody you stand by, while somebody who's actually been by your side, despite small differences, maybe not small, but different, just a few differences. And that's the traitor. Sarah Field simply says, Marjorie Taylor Greene is retiring because she's sick of everything, which is kind of what people might take from it, but it's hard to know for sure. But Tara makes a point and says, not retiring, this was a calculated political move to set the stage for the America First, America Only psyop that will take over when MAGA finally dies. Now, that's a really good point. Now, even on top of what I was thinking before, which was just that she's probably going to run for president, is that if you think about where they are right now, and whether it was Trump just blustering through this or the calculated move was that maybe they could push you this far and it's not working, that they have recognized they've stepped too far and that MAGA is retreating from support. And so they go, okay, we'll pause, right? We can't lose this, just hypothetically speaking. So they find somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been MAGA and was there in the beginning, but is now pulled away, who you could argue might have more MAGA support, who then steps into, as you write, the America First, America Only, maybe with Elon's New America Party, right? Like you can see where that goes. And even, that may go that way, even if that wasn't the original plan. It just seems to add up, doesn't it? And she says, with Trump and when MAGA dies, with Trump and a ragtag group of rogue new heroes emerge from the roots and it says, and her point is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey, Rand Paul, RFK. I certainly hope not. That would be depressing. If it was that way and then it went the same, that would depress me. On the national, or alternatively, if it happened and they changed everything for the better, whatever side they're on, we should all support that. I'd like to believe that's possible. On the national stage, so the unwashed masses think that their principled saviors have finally arrived, which is what they did with Trump. It's what they do with RFK Jr. It's what they do every single time. But like I said, it shouldn't stop you from hoping that it's going to happen, but just don't be blinded by that hope. Be real about what's happening. Now, as always, my choice would be no government at all. But if we're in this situation, having people like that with a limited government view who would fight to make that happen would be a positive step. if that happened. She will probably be on every podcast, she writes, and news programs so much that I will get even more sick of her than I already am, but she has to keep getting herself and her new cross-party lines and Christian love because I'm all above it image out there, so there's a possibility she will be able to be solid VP in 28 or president. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me, but it's all hypothetical at this point. Now, this is a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene on Tucker talking about Israel, our greatest ally, and the reality of it, which I'm glad is being talked about, genuinely. But I also agree with David Icke, which is, where have they been? Right? And not just over this last 6 months to a year. The U.S. has been controlled from Israel since 1948. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I might even disagree with that far back. The point, like full control. But I very much agree, as I'm sure you know, that at some point along that line, that is what happened. That Israel verifiably is at least influencing to a very strong degree U.S. policy. And he simply says that where were they for all these years it's been going on when they, I mean, you don't just wake up and see it today. How about even at the beginning of the genocide? They weren't saying this, not even Tucker. And it says in 48, and so has the UK with the Rothschilds dictated Balfour Declaration in 1917. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney exposed long ago the pledge of loyalty to Israel demanded of U.S. politicians before Zionist money is handed over. We've talked about that on the show. Palestinians were slaughtered in the creation of Israel and have been slaughtered incrementally ever since, long before October 7th. Where have they been? Now, suddenly they and their like notice this is a problem. It has always been a problem through all the years when they were saying nothing while others were mass canceled for pointing this out. You know, the people they won't talk to. Now, it can be both, guys, right? It can be both. It can be the reality that they're now suddenly seeing it and want to call it out, but also were keeping their mouth shut before, or rather more so, or, you know, like a Charlie Kirk kind of a point, right? Where you suddenly see something that really does make you concerned because maybe you think you're fighting for America and you miss, you know, the Zionist point, for example. But then, you know, you still were sort of pulling punches for Israel the whole time. The bottom line is it's good that it's being pointed at. It's good that it's getting attention. Just don't let it in your mind cement the fact that these are the ones that broke that story for you, or these are the ones that have been the ones to do the work to get it out. The point is, you know, even David Icke and myself aside, there's people that have been doing this, they're focused for their entire career. I mean, someone like Abby Martin, by the way, well before she, but I mean, I coming up soon, by the way, I wasn't even going to say this, but maybe 2 years ago, I reached out to Abby and I said, hey, I want to play your documentary. I got to see that for the world premiere in LA when she first premiered it. And I asked her if I could play it in a local theater, which I really still want to do. And if, by the way, if you're listening and you have some way to do that somewhere in Tennessee, let me know. And I thought about doing it like an open area and having like a thing. It just became too much work. I wanted to find a theater and just have a showing and let people come. Obviously, nobody, even to this very day, will let it happen. And so I just decided, I think what I'm going to do is just do a show focused on Israel, on Gaza, and just like a short opening and just play it, get it some reach, because it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on the reality of Gaza. It's called Gaza Fights for Freedom. My point is that Abby Martin's been doing this for so long, with such extensive, deep, well-sourced work, that there's just no way that you could pretend that you didn't know about this. Abby Martin, they know who she is. They know her work, you know? Anyway, Tucker for sure. So I agree with David, but I am still glad that it's getting out there. Now, Newsweek, to end with a point on the segment that I think is worth highlighting, Marjorie Taylor Greene has received assassination threats, according to her and the police she reported to, right? But I don't disagree with this, guys. As we all point out, I get them. People in this field, especially people at their level, will get them inevitably. Doesn't make it okay. It just, there's ridiculous people out there. But the fact that it exploded, as she tells you, after Trump called her out, it just makes a very clear point. Now, the first thing to stand back and recognize is they were just screaming that calling someone a fascist was inciting violence and they're all responsible for Charlie Kirk being killed. I don't agree with that in either direction, because people are responsible for their own actions. But in regard to, and I mean legally speaking, but would you argue they're in some way responsible for driving people to, yeah, to a degree, and you could go after them personally, sue them if you want, but as a personal thing, like they say, you know, you have a right to do it, we have a right to call it out and do whatever, yeah, then you could acknowledge that those people are disgusting. But the point is that you can't say that they said fascist, therefore that action is your responsibility. But what they claim was that was the case. So now in reverse, just to make the point, you now have them on the Republican side calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor, a treason, and way, way worse, as you well know if you look. And then people start to actually threaten her life, assuming that, of course, it's also possible they lied. I don't believe that. I think this makes sense. And so all it shows you is that the government very much drives irrational and kind of extreme partisan obsession. And then people do things like this. And I think very real sense, whether FBI or something deeper, there's manipulations of these things. If you want to go to an MK Ultra kind of conversation, I do not think it is something you should disregard. But so she simply said that they were threatening her, that it came because of everything that Trump was doing, right? And then even went further. Representative Jason Crow says that he's getting death threats after Trump said that they were seditious for pointing out that that it's legal for you to disregard an unlawful order, which is exactly what they said. And they just pretended they didn't say that. And so what's interesting is to see how this is being played. Now, I want you to stand back and recognize that no, the individual government entity that said that should not be legally responsible for somebody who committed a crime because they thought Trump was, even if they were saying, do bad things to them, I still think that you could sue them and win. I think if you're going to make a hard line on free speech, then that has to be where we are. But what I want you to think about is that the government doing this, all it leads to is the control over speech. And that's what they're doing. And on top of that, which we're going to get into with the Muslim Brotherhood point, next segment, after that next one, quickly end this point, is that they're using this to create not just the free speech censorship dynamic, but then to use that to claim that you're terrorist because of association, because of words that were used, exactly what the right was saying the left was doing, and the right's doing it too, because the government is doing it to you. Always has been. So hypocrisy and self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, quickly, just to show this, because on the back of that point, Trump is losing a lot of support. Now, I don't trust these polls, but I think it's self-evident, and I've been covering this for a year. For the reality of the two-party illusion breaking down, which I think we're also seeing, hopefully. I've been incessantly talking about that for years because I think it's obvious, and I don't really know anybody else doing that. So I just think it's worth pointing out. It's not because I'm guessing. It's because I genuinely think if you're objective and nonpartisan, these things start to stand out. And I think the same point with the MAGA support and Trump, I've been saying, look, I don't think conservatives support what's happening. And I get laughed. People act like I don't know what I'm talking about. And look at where we are. Isn't it interesting how somebody like TLAV can be so accurate before and yet nothing ever, the point is that the groups like us, IMA, independent media, are shockingly suppressed in the flowing conversation, which I don't care about. As long as we can keep doing this and you guys keep funding us to keep doing it, it's not about trying to be on Tucker's show. It's about the point is that the information we're relaying gets kneecapped and it doesn't reach the people who truly need it. You guys are here because you know we're here. And so to a degree, you already know this stuff. And so they're not longer worried about you seeing it. They're worried about the other masses who don't know that we exist. So just think about that. Now, the point is, these polls show that he's losing that support. I was just simply acknowledging that we've been saying that's happening long before it's been acknowledged. And so it says President Donald Trump has declining approval ratings across the board, and voters are growing dissatisfied with his handling of the economy, according to a series of polls. Now, again, like I said, I don't trust the polls, but I think with all the other points together and the independent point I want to focus on, it's already pretty clear that support declining. Now, you could argue it's not the majority, but I think that's clear for two reasons. One, because the majority of American voters do not even participate. On top of that, right now, even within his own support base, it's pretty harsh. A host of polls from different outlets spell bad news for Trump. Meanwhile, declining approval among swing groups such as independents, Hispanic voters, and younger Americans that were like his core for the most part, increases uncertainty for the future of administration and the Republican majority in Congress. Now, here are the polls, just to quickly show them to you. A Fox News poll. I think that means something. Trump rated worse than Biden on the economy. So all this pressure, the economy is amazing, 401ks and grocery prices are down. Nobody believes him. Why? Because they're not stupid. They're buying groceries and they're not down. So this is my point about the majority of people who are not just blind, dishonest, cat turd Benny Johnson types. They're not, they just want to support Trump, but they're like, but you're lying, and that's not true. So a Fox News poll is taken, and the reality is that we are in a bad position. Now, I'm not blaming that on Trump. It's Trump and Biden and Obama and Bush. Your government put you here. Trump's a part of that. Reuters, IPSOS, Trump's overall approval hits second-term low. Another one, AP NORC poll, approval among Americans has plummeted. And all the links are in here if you want to go through them independently. Morning Consult, net approval drops to minus 10 is what it says. I'm not sure what that relates to in regard to, you know, you can look at the poll itself. It simply says the morning the Consult survey between the 7th and 9th showed Trump's net approval at minus 10 points. That's crazy. Down from minus 5. And it says Emerson College, Trump approval drops among Hispanics, which he likes to, kind of praise himself for. Nate Silver, Trump approval rating hits record low. What is this? UNIDOS US poll. Trump's approval among Latino voters dips. Oh, so it's a Spanish word. And it's in the last one. Oh, and the Independent was one I briefly pointed to. I want to make a point on that with this next clip. But it says Republican pollster Darren Shaw told Fox News, quote, the situation isn't complicated. People are struggling to afford necessities and blaming those in charge. Now, he still goes on to say, what's interesting is watching Democrats gain politically from a problem they arguably caused. And that crushed them in the 2024, but that's politics. Now, of course, it's always about they did it, not the current. It's both. Obviously, what Trump's continued to do is shockingly exacerbated the problem, but it's also his first administration before that. And the one before that, guys. It's lazy thinking to pretend like it was only the one before. But that's how politics works. You're right. That's what they do. But it's interesting that he has to acknowledge it. Yep, they're blaming the Trump administration because they're the ones in power. Yep, that's how it works. In his speech Wednesday, 2025, Saudi Investment Forum, Trump said, quote, so my poll numbers just went down, but with smart people, they've gone way up. He can't even shy away from insulting you, his base, the very people who are going out to support this Trump. And he goes, well, you're dumb. That's why. You're not smart. That's why. Get out of the way. I mean, that's weakness. I don't even believe he thinks that. I think that is desperate to try to go, well, if you're not supporting me, it's because you're stupid, to hope that you're going to go, oh, no, I don't want to be dumb. I support Trump again. And that's why they're failing. Now, this is a clip about independence that I think is really important to think about. First, let's play the clip.
Trump's net approval rating with independents. Back in January, he was close to even. He was at minus 4 points. Not great, but not terrible. Look at this number. 43. Trump's net approval rating with independents. Back in January, he was close to even. He was at minus 4 points. Not great, but not terrible. Look at this number. 43 points underwater with independents in the most recent average of these polls. When you have 43 points underwater with independents, you know you're doing terribly. You can't win with this. If this holds for next year's midterm election, wave adios, amigos. Goodbye. See you later to that House Republican majority and that Senate Republican majority very much in danger as well. When you take a look at the Pew Research validated voter survey going back to last year, he was basically even among independents with Kamala Harris. Now he is 43 points underwater. Whatever he is doing with independents, it ain't working. They despise him at this point.
That is just a colossal drop.
Oh, my God.
I think that's pretty easy to prove. There's a couple of ways to think about this before you even get into the independence point, which is, there's a point to discuss. Like, let's put it this way. If you think that your votes translate to the outcome, which I can't, I don't, I think it's pretty clear that we all, any number of ways of voting machines and, on and on and on. But just for sake of conversation, if you think that's the case, and I could be wrong, you could argue that there's a ploy to allowing or like making, which that's how I would look at it, but letting Democrats kind of sweep the midterms. And then using that to somehow argue that they hampered what you were trying to do, or that they're, even though you're still the party in control, that you could argue that they somehow are more in control now. And that way you gain support for the next election for presidency. It's interesting to think about, because there's a point to be made about when you're in power, it's easy to blame, so the Democrats can act like that's all their fault. And then that's why it teeter-totters. Because then what's going to happen likely is that the Democrats win next time because Trump has been doing what he's been doing. It's just, and it goes back and forth. But I think it's always your government playing that against you. But we're thinking about, right? Because that may be part of what this is. But, if you believe like I do, I think that these don't really translate. So what that means, if that's the case, is that this is what they want to happen, whatever happens, And so what that would mean is that you ultimately then create the illusion of that. But either way, I think the point is important to think about. So the point of the independence is what Steve and I always talk about, right? And I actually found something to show you this. Gallup poll, National Independent ID remains at record high. Has been for a while, by the way. This just went over the majority. It says independent ID remains steady at a record high of 43%. up to 2024. The data also followed the first year in which the polling group found a majority of Americans, 51%, identify as independent for the first time in the monthly party affiliation index. Now, I think it's more than that, because what I've tends to see, well, my opinion is sort of irrelevant. I think there's probably more independents, but the point to make is that in every election, as Steve and I talk about, the majority of voters don't participate. And then within that majority, or rather within the people that do participate, the majority of them every year are independent. And so when they say that's 51%, what they mean is that the people who are involved in voting. So first recognize that, 60-something% of people, or 50-something% rather, I think it's 50-something% because it's usually 40-something% of involved, are people who don't even participate. And I don't think that's because they don't care. Some of it is for sure, but people like me, I don't. It's because I'm very much involved. I'm so hyper aware that that I think that that's a manipulation. The only way to win a rigged game is to not play. And look, if it was something that actually did translate, I would be involved. And that's my opinion. I could be wrong. But so thinking about the fact that the majority of people in this country don't even involve themselves, then realizing the majority of those that do are independent, and that's now gone over the majority of that group, 51%, and then you find out that they hate Donald Trump, it just simply shows you the independents are the largest category by far. So in other words, the majority of American people despise Trump. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying that has to mean anything other than the obvious. You could argue that he still should be president. It's just the point is that most Americans, which is what's supposed to represent what this is, don't want him there. But hopefully we can think that about all of them and maybe actually change something. But isn't that interesting? Steve and I bring that up so often because it's such an interesting point to realize that they constantly yell at you about democracy and everybody agree when most Americans aren't even the ones involved in that, if even that translates to the outcome. With all we know about Israel and what they've been doing, do you believe that Israel would allow it to be up to us, especially with what's going on today? If that's the case. Now, a point was, this has got deleted. I don't know if that was for some other reason. The entire account got deleted. This was, I just found the video somewhere else and reshared it with this post, or this one here. Just so you can see what I'm talking about. So this was the post. I just really copied it and shared it again with this person's post, but this one got deleted. Now I'm only showing you that to make sense of the next post, which is that Robert Barnes shared the same thing, which is now deleted, and says, read that again about independents. Independents despise Trump at this point. I just think it's important to recognize that somebody like Robert Barnes, who again, I pointed out, was very, very supportive of Trump, like a lot of them were. And now a lot of them, like people like him, are starting to go, it's not what you think. Because it's obvious. That's the point I'm making. And I just think that's important to think about. Now, this was back in July. Independents drive Trump's approval to 37%, second term low, back in July. Now, this is as of today, right now, from YouGov. But again, I don't trust these polls. But with everything we've shown you, I think this pretty much speaks for itself. But I would dispute the percentages are exactly what they say. But it says, per this week's Economist YouGov poll, this is a candidly TIFF, Trump's overall approval is flat. Overall, 40% approval, 56% disapproval. That's overall. So the majority of people at this point don't support him, according to these polls. 48% whites approve, 50% disapprove, 7% blacks approve, 84% disapprove, 39% Hispanics approve, 58% disapprove, 30% independents, 62% disapprove. I don't know how I think it's pretty wild. His approval is plus 14 with Latino at plus 3 with independents from the last month. It's all over the plot with different polls and stuff, but man, that just shows you something, I think. Now, overlapping this with the point of where, connecting a lot of these things right now, actually, the Israel influence, the way that they're manipulating through that, which is right now with, using anti-Semitism, hate speech, censorship, and like irrationally driving, or at least trying to, and I think kind of failing, but trying to drive an irrational anti-Muslim narrative and sentiment through this country. And so let's talk about that, because right now there's two things happening. Texas and then members of Congress like Ted Cruz are supporting the idea of registering the Muslim Brotherhood and a group called CAIR as foreign terrorist organizations. Not because they commit any crimes, but because of their ideology. which, by the way, shouldn't even be legal. It's not, in fact, in this country. It's a violation of free speech, but they don't care about any of this, like they didn't when they arrested Khalil and Ozturk and everything else they're doing. This is the same conversation. I mean, this is coming back around, whether it's immigration or Israel or what they did, with the overlap right there in the beginning. Remember, it started with people like Khalil. He was the first one. He wasn't an illegal immigrant. He only said bad things were in their mind about Israel. And that was that they're committing a genocide. And they tried to deport him like Ozturk. They arrested him instantly and then just went to a bunch of random people on the street, most of which weren't criminals, most of which were here legally. Easy to prove. It's wild. This really is wild where we are. Now, we'll start with Valentina Gomez. This is like a Randy Fine 2.0 for a woman. Now, what she says, Marjorie Taylor Greene betrayed President Trump and MAGA. No, not at all. Cheated on her husband with children multiple times. Whether that's true or not, which frankly, I don't care about in the context of political points. It's like, this is the kind of thing is like, they get into the personal stuff. Like, yeah, you could argue that speaks to character and speaks to whether you'd be honest, which they all lie to us. Like, so it's not like it should be like, yes, I don't, the point is when it comes to whether or not she is doing the right thing for Republicans, that has no bearing on the conversation, especially since most of them are all 100 times worse, whether they're Epstein connected or whether they lie about being Christians or lie about being or Republicans for that matter. So all that aside, that's not even the point I want to get to. It's just funny. It just shows you, it's like Laura Loomer. It's petty, it's small, it's childish, and they don't even realize it in themselves. Made millions from congressional stock trading. Yeah, like they all do, which again, one of the many reasons why I doubt that any of them are honest. Now she resigns from Congress. She says, this is the point. This is just so crazy to me. From that sentence, she just goes, I will end Islam. Okay. Help President Trump make America great again and never quit on my people. Okay, where in the world did that even come from? So what is Islam? Why would you say that in this post? Because that's her whole thing. Is Muslims are bad and everyone's that it's the most deranged, bigoted. It is Laura Loomer running for Congress. It's what she's doing. She's out there very much projecting, just like Elon did in the beginning, MAGA and free, everything you wanted to hear, he just yelled it at you. And most people bought it apparently. Same thing she's doing, free speech and I own guns and I'm I hate Muslims and Israel's the best. That's what she's doing. That's her whole thing. It's weird. It's actually really weird. Now, what's interesting is Trump has not outright supported her, but it's pretty clear to me, at least, that she does have support from the machine. But that's just to start with the overlap. Marjorie Taylor Greene betrayed him and I'm going to end Islam, which in case you don't know, that just means the Muslim religion, guys. Now they try to pretend that means one thing versus the other. The reality is there is always a political overlap. There is for Christianity, there is for Judaism, there is for Muslims or just Islam in general, which is, same thing. The point is that there is a political machine or entity, right, that I think is problematic. That's what leads to the extremism when it comes to that overlap. And it happens in all of them. It shouldn't be only with Islam or only with Judaism or only with Christian. It's anybody in any sense that ends up being extreme and acting in extreme ways. Like the fact that anybody could disagree with that and be like, no, it's just the Muslims. It shouldn't exist with what we know in the world today. It's just not the case. It's actually just pure stupidity and bigotry because it's never all, or, that's like saying every Jewish person is bad, including that child that was born 10 seconds ago. It's irrational. So here is a very important article. And I told you I was going to go through these. I want to go through these now with what Robert wrote and predicted this before it actually happened. And it's very important to think about where this goes. So this was on the 13th of November. He wrote, the title was Israel's Anti-Muslim Hasbara and its Agenda to Eliminate Free Speech, which is exactly what's happening. Now, I want to state out of the gate, this is not necessarily, or not even at all, a defense of any of these groups. But I will make points that I think it's worth pointing out, like defending anybody's right to free speech or ideology, freedom of ideology. But I've seen plenty of things overlapping in the past, and even Robert would point out, which I think we may even work on an article like that overlaps with Muslim Brotherhood and how that's been abused in reverse ways. But this point is about how what we can see is that designating this group that has connections to groups that are not in any way other than just politically motivated for fighting for free Palestine. That's it. And that they are already trying to connect those dots to make those groups, which I think are the focus, not the Muslim Brotherhood, but things like Mamdani's campaign, which even that we'll get to. I tend to think he's more connected to where this goes than anything else, but you can decide for yourself. But the point is, Students for Peace, Jews for It's right down here. I forget the names for them now, but we've talked about them. One is Students for Peace and Justice in Palestine or something like that. And these are groups that are just college groups that are fighting for Palestine to be free. And they're the groups they're already focusing on. Think about it. And this is where this tends to go. So don't take this as a defense of anything other than free speech and how they use these designations to create ambiguous window to go after anyone that they want. And there's a lot of points we'll make about this. And it's been going on quite a long time. So, lurking behind, he writes to begin, an ongoing campaign to drive fear of an alleged Muslim terrorism threat is a legislative initiative that seeks to use terrorist designations. And think about how this relates to what Trump's doing with Antifa, with foreign groups that they're actually working with, right? To use use terrorist designations to silence those critical of Israel, led by pro-Israeli influencers and think tanks. Not only is this a disinformation effort aimed at salvaging Israel's image amongst conservatives, which we all know is suffering right now, it is also designed to attack free speech. In July, the Israelis initiated, which we all know by now, a new propaganda campaign that clearly sought to capture the minds of right-wingers, mostly in the United States. This followed the release of Pew Research data in April, which found that 50%, 50, of Republicans under the age of 50 had unfavorable views of Israel. And that has only been wildly exacerbated by the post-Charlie Kirk conversation. Simultaneous, by the way, as we saw with that clip at Turning Point USA, or the one with Glenn Beck at the same point, where they were literally going, and Glenn Beck is sweating, and they're responding, like acting, like pushing back his questions, and they're going, U.S. is liberty, Israel, guys, I don't know how anybody denies what's happening right now. Simultaneously, back in July, he writes, a legislative push was also underway. And this is not the first time, by the way, they've been focusing on the Muslim Brotherhood, but it says a bill called H.R. 4397, or the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025, was introduced to Congress and had been lobbied in favor of by pro-Israeli Washington-based think tank, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, not even remotely what it actually does, and Christians United for Israel, of course. By October, the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft then published a story that revealed how Israel had been paying, quote, a cohort of 14 to 18 social media influencers, which you all know, about $7,000 per post to promote the country's image in the American public, which failed spectacularly, still does. This campaign was nicknamed the Esther Project, a title eerily similar to the infamous Project Esther of the Heritage Foundation, the think tank that is known to be the most influential over the Trump administration. Now, as always, guys, please read the whole article, because I'm just trying to get you the gist of it, but there's many things he adds to this that are important, quotes from different documents that back up what he's saying. Now, it says this free speech crackdown, back then and right now what's happening, has run into major legal hurdles and pushback along the way, which is where the legislative push against the Muslim Brotherhood comes into the picture, right? They're not really succeeding in what they're trying to do. This will give them more tools to suppress people like us who are winning out over their narratives. And it says it is something that not only the Israel lobby is throwing its weight behind, but also the United Arab Emirates as well. Now, Stefanik, who you well know, the one that was like aggressively pushing the anti-Semitism rise in the country that was very much proven to be a complete hoax. Not that there's not people that are racist or anti-Semitic, but that they absolutely, without question, lied about the picture that it was. And she was out there with her hands shaking, screaming about people. And then even the police in that hearing said that what she was referring to was not even true. Marching through schools, killing kill the Jews, didn't happen. The woman got stabbed in the eye with a flag. Nope, didn't happen. Right? These are the main ones they were pushing. So she stated in August, quote, I strongly support the Trump administration in designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Long overdue, she says. Thank you, President Trump, for this important and decisive leadership to protect our national security. She just so happens, by the way, as he writes, to have been granted the Dr. Miriam and Sheldon Adelson Defender of Israel Award by the Zionist Organization of America, an award named after Donald Trump's top donors. Right. And let's not forget, the Adelson plane was what was used to fly back Jonathan Pollard, who was given a hero's welcome back to Israel, even though he was an Israeli spy that got arrested in the United States and was being charged with essentially death if they were going to go that far. That's treason. Trump was just talking about it. But apparently only for people that, point out that unlawful orders shouldn't be followed. People who are actually traitors working for a foreign government, nah, he's a friend, get him out of here. Now, meanwhile, it says close Trump administration ally Laura Loomer has been at the forefront of an anti-Muslim campaign that constantly drives irrational fear about a looming 9/11 style attack. Like, you guys have seen this. This This image here, let me just do this, is wild to me. And it's the same thing you'll see if you look up, like, for example, Civil War under Tim Pool, or World War III under Alex Jones. It's interesting now that you step back and think about it. It's the same template, and they're all doing the same thing. Ready for 9/11, ready for 9/11, get ready for 9/11, get ready for 9/11. She's been saying that forever. And, you could argue that there's something behind that. But at the end of the day, she's just hyping the fear. And it says, this tactic recycles the Iraq War playbook of fear-mongering about al-Qaeda attacks, predicting that such atrocities are coming soon to a town near you. The same thing is said about Hamas. Remember that? And this has been used by those like ex-CIA operative Sarah Adams, who has now been transformed into a self-styled pseudo-whistleblower. Sarah Adams was the one that came out with the lie about the ISIS threats that were being made around, that was like a couple weeks ago. Remember that? Where they said ISIS threats in the country. They said they're going to come after us during the holiday. Absolutely proven to be a complete hoax. Even Twitter called them out. That was Sarah Adams. And they just hyped up the idea. ISIS is coming after us. You mean the ISIS you're working with in Gaza, the ISIS gangs you're working with? Or you mean the ISIS groups in Syria? Or is it the ISIS groups in Yemen you're working with? All of which you can prove. Continuing, it says, in the event that any terrorist attack does happen around that time, they constantly predict, and they can suddenly claim to have warned everybody that they knew, despite repeatedly predicting such attacks and constantly getting it wrong time and time again. Very much a Jones tactic, right? You can yell it out every 30 seconds. Eventually something will happen. You can be like, that's the thing I meant. Or, it's what they do. And she posted this, or the next one. He goes, just as the pre-2003 invasion of Iraq propaganda attempted to brainwash the public into believing that al-Qaeda was working with Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, which wasn't the case. And in this case, we know that al-Qaeda, who they're currently working with in Syria, was always a group they were working with. It says today, these like Laura Loomers, those like Laura Loomers and Sarah Adams of the new media are claiming that such terrorist networks are connected to Hamas and the Palestinians. Just as Saddam Hussein hated al-Qaeda, Hamas has fought bloody battles to eliminate both al-Qaeda and ISIS in Gaza. Now, you could argue, which is a fair point to make, that doesn't prove that they're not terrorists or that they're not bad people, but it is absolutely verifiable that they fought and do not work with or like al-Qaeda or ISIS. So why do they lie about it? Because it's just what they do. And they know they use their proxy force to align with groups they want to go after. So think of this point with the Muslim Brotherhood and how they're trying to use it to associate groups they want to go after. It's the same point. This does not matter for such propagandists, however, as they play on the ignorance of their audiences and treat them like fools. That's what they do. Now, I argue Laura within that is a fool herself, but same point. The line of anti-Muslim rhetoric now espoused by these influencers, which you can also hear from Israeli-backed British right-wing personalities like Tommy Robinson, is that Hezbollah, Hamas, al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Muslim Brotherhood are all the same thing, all in the same team. From there, they advocate explicitly for banning the Muslim Brotherhood. Laura Loomer even let the cat out of the bag completely in the following post, which we'll get to in a second. She says, Trump could easily dismantle Mamdani and his entire Islamic network by denigrating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. So very interesting overlap with what just happened in their meeting, right? And on top of that, that Trump is now hinting at designating them as a terrorist organization. So what is, there's something that we're going to do it more when we talk about the Mamdani overlap and what Trump said in the meeting. Very, very strange. Now, if you think of my opinion and taking for a moment at face value what I believe, that there is no difference of the parties at the government level, not with you, and that they ultimately use these things to get you in a certain position, well, then that means Mamdani is a part of this and they're trying to counterbalance, and Trump working with him will alleviate the tension around maybe some of the Democrat side of it. Well, the Republicans are going to hate it. Well, they shift into going Muslims bad and they're all right back on board. And then Mamdani goes, yeah, they're bad too, however it works. Or maybe this swings back around and they go after Mamdani to remove him. The point is that at the end of the day, it all adds up to the government control of your life. The idea that because you are, sharing that post, you're also a terrorist, or because they gave you money or vice versa. This is how this works. And top of that, she highlights the Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial, which we'll get to in a second. As he writes, before going further, it is important to address the case of the Holy Land Foundation, which he was referencing, and its 5 members who were given prison sentences of up to 65 years. Right-wing influencers like Laura are using this as a means to go after Mamdani. Now, remember, my point is not that we're supporting him. At least I'm not. I believe that this just represents more government. but it's important to consider that there very well could be, maybe he is fighting against these things. Just because somebody believes in socialism doesn't mean they're an evil person. There's plenty of people that believe in government government is the same thing to me. Socialism, democracy, and at the end of the day, it allows government to collect power at the top and control your lives. It's very simple to me. But my point in saying that is that people could believe in democracy and socialism and actually think that's going to help. So this game they play where he says socialism, therefore we know he's a bad guy, is just the most simplistic, lacking of critical thinking view. But that's what they do. It's the lowest common denominator. So in the cases that she's basically, what it's saying is she's been pointing to this as the claim to go after him, and says claiming that it represented a smoking gun when the Holy Land Foundation was declared a terrorist organization. He writes, it is actually a representation of what a completely unfair and unjust government crackdown on a charitable organization looks like. Now, the point that Robert's making, whatever your thoughts are on the Holy Land Foundation, the point is about how the designation was used to go after other groups. That's the only point we're really making here. And it says, quote, the Holy Land Foundation for Relief and Development was shut down by the Bush administration and designated a terrorist organization in the wake of 9/11, even though it donated money to Palestinian charities that the U.S. government itself supported. Think about that for a second. Human Rights Watch reported that. So the U.S. government supported groups, and I argue the overlap here is that either one or two things are possible here. That they were supporting the same groups that Israel was supporting, and so they're both working in that way, and they're just using that to go after them, which would make them somewhat manipulative, or that ultimately they're just funding into Palestine, and the point they're making is that these charities that the U.S. government supporting were because the U.S. government was in some way actually helping. That's kind of the only two ways I can see that. But all that aside, they were donating to the same places the U.S. government were, and then they used those donations to claim they were terrorists. So in effect, it's quite on the nose, right? Yes, I agree the U.S. governments are also a terrorist group. But it says they go on to clarify the following details. And it says, the defendants in the Holy Land Foundation case were never accused of directly funding terrorist organizations or even with terrorist attacks, nor were the Palestinian charities they funded accused of doing so. Doesn't that sound familiar to the October 31st terror plot idea or the shooting in Dallas of the ICE location? All of them are basically that you were there alongside somebody who did something. And both cases are people going, I don't even know that person. I wasn't involved with that person. They could be lying, of course. Now, there's more nuance to it. I'm just trying to do it quickly. So think about the overlap, that they simply go, you're bad, right? And therefore, anybody associated with you is now a suspect, even though you're doing something that in and of itself is not even really a terrorist act, nor did you do anything illegal. And it says, nonetheless, they were prosecuted under U.S., and this is the point, material support legislation. That's exactly what they're claiming for the kids in the October 31st attack in Dearborn, Michigan, which I'm going to keep following. I'm willing to bet you anything that this is going to come out more. And it goes on to say that prosecuted under the U.S. support legislation on the notion that the social programs they financed help win the hearts and minds of Palestinian people for Hamas. Think about the abstract connection there. So they're simply giving, they're basically donating to groups that aren't, even they are breaking the law. They're simply putting out, they claim information that then convinces Palestinians that they shouldn't support Israel, which drives them to Hamas. But okay, where's the crime in all of this? Because their work is then ending up doing what you claim helps Hamas, therefore they're all terrorists. I mean, that's so insane, but they went after them. And Laura's pointing to that as a case to go after Mamdani. I'm just trying to tie together that this is the same thing, or rather Robert is, and I'm making the point for you, that this is the same effort, and they will use this to go after people like us, or Students for Peace in Palestine. I'll get to the name of it in a second. Oh, it's right here. Students for Justice in Palestine, or Jewish Voice for Peace, or American Muslims for Palestine. These are not terrorist organizations. They're groups that fight for Palestine. And they're going to go after them because what do? Well, they help win the hearts and minds. Well, how about the Palestinian people can believe what they want? And how about the fact that even if you're going to make it about Hamas, Israel funded Hamas? And on top of all of that, that what Israel's doing is a genocide. And you're telling us not supporting that is the thing that makes them terrorists? It just is so, it beggars belief. And it says the U.S. government's case was based in part on evidence obtained through, guess what, FISA wiretaps, as well as evidence obtained via questionable foreign intelligence from Israel. Oh my God, what a surprise. So essentially they used FISA wiretaps to illegally get things that they said that weren't necessarily indicative of criminal activity, but like they did with the other guy, wink, wink, he said pumpkin, therefore Halloween, therefore terrorist attack because of everything else. And here, because of Israel's intelligence that said, there we are. And then, of course, faulty translations, which were actually proven that they mistranslated. Oops, by accident. No, that's what Israel does to claim what they were saying was more terroristic. And then it says, and accusations by anonymous Israeli military witnesses who claimed that charities receiving funding from their group and from the U.S. government itself were involved in terrorism. Right? So they're simply, these are Israeli military. So everything stems back from Israeli military, Israeli intelligence, and then weirdly associated things that don't prove anything unless you make it all make sense with their things that weren't provable. And mistranslated, guys. Like, you can literally go back to this, and this is supposed to be the bombshell case. And this, by the way, was a quote directly from Human Rights Watch. It says, if we now link the legislative push to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization to the Heritage Foundation's Project Esther, which he did in the earlier paragraph, the agenda becomes even more clear. The targeted organizations in the United States that are considered to be part of a so-called Hamas support network, which is actually these acronyms they use, are clearly groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace, the American Muslims for Palestine. The document also goes on to make another designation that could then be attributed more broadly to anyone supporting Palestinians, calling them affiliated Hamas support organizations. See, this was laid out, guys. And so note the next paragraph. This was laid out before they got here. So now once they designate the Muslim Brotherhood, that will click it all into place. They'll turn around and go after anybody that they consider an affiliated Hamas support. So that means you share their content, that you donate to them. Maybe even if they are, how can you prove that you knew that what they were doing it for? This is so abstract, especially knowing that the case they're pointing to, or Laura is, that does come into play, is a case that was completely built and cobbled together like everything else we talk about in this topic today. And then it goes on to say the mere fact that specific acronyms were created by the Heritage Foundation, HSN, HSO, to designate particular American nonprofits, not pretend nonprofits that are like AIPAC, or not nonprofit, but not something pretending to be American like a lot of these Israeli overlaps, but actual U.S. groups that are actually fighting for Palestine, which again is not hard to verify. It says American nonprofits and organizations as being affiliated with Hamas, which isn't being proven, by the way. It's if you share content, is a serious cause for public concern because we're being censored through it. And possibly legal accusations. As the unconstitutional crackdowns continue and the weaponization of ICE to detain people based upon their criticism of Israel expands, the most infamous example being Muhammad Khalil, these crackdowns will likely grow exponentially as the Muslim Brotherhood is designated a terrorist organization. So, I mean, it's very clear where this continues to go, right? That they're building this. And obviously, we should be concerned about how they've been using this. And of course, criticizing Israel is a central part to this. They're basically funding it. This is a key component to the Zionist campaign, he writes, aimed at cracking down on the First Amendment rights as the Muslim Brotherhood is being actively linked to organizations across the United States. And they did this retroactively, or rather, before we got here. As this is happening, pro-Israeli propagandists are working overtime to convince the public that such a crackdown is necessary, and that banning the Muslim Brotherhood is about keeping Americans safe from Al-Qaeda or ISIS, the groups that the U.S. government is funding and working with. To anyone with even a basic understanding of the Middle East or Muslim groups, this excuse, as he writes, almost seems so unserious that it's laughable. It is the exact same war on terror playbook, and this narrative is also coming from people who are funded by the same Zionist billionaires and pro-war think tanks and organizations like the David Horowitz Freedom Center, all of which were at the forefront of fear-mongering about Islamic terror as a means of justifying the invasion of Iraq. They've done it before. And broad crackdowns on American civil liberties around that time to this very day. Just because the individual propagandist may be working for the Daily Wire, or it is now Palantir that is at the forefront of the technological crackdown, doesn't mean it is being funded by different people. His point is just because it's shifted into technocracy and other fake, mainstream alternative media, as opposed to David Horowitz Freedom Center, things have shifted, but it's the same agenda. Now, Senator Cruz on the 18th shared what Greg Abbott shared on the 18th, which was that they, in Texas, from the state perspective, he designated the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Now, I think this was the step to get that to happen. Like, basically, this was done by one of the most pro-Zionist people in political power today, Greg Abbott. Well, I mean, that's hard. Maybe it's hard to say over some of the Trump cabinet, but he's been very long a supporter of Zionism and Israel, that this was the nudge to get it to happen at the federal level, probably from somebody outside of our government. Senator Cruz, all these very clear Zionist supporters, steps in and says, excellent, an important decision. The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. Okay. Well, so Robert was correct. That is what happened. So on the 20th, he followed up. In his previous article, as we just went over, he argued that the sudden rise in anti-Islam rhetoric from the pro-Israel right in the United States was being used as a pretext to justify a free speech crackdown, one that would come in the form of legislative initiatives. Week later, it's exactly what's happening. On Tuesday, Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, issued a proclamation designating Muslim Brotherhood, but also the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, as both foreign terrorist organizations and transnational criminal organizations. See, that not only makes it more abstract, multinational, but it also, you could overlap it with other groups that you want to connect it with. Hamas, Hezbollah, even though that's not the case we're talking about here. Greg Abbott's disregard for the First Amendment was one of the statements they put out. I mean, this is from CAR or CAIR. I mean, they're not accusing them of breaking the law, guys. They're not going, that's a criminal activity right there, or you committed a terror attack. They're saying that your general ideas and what you talk about and what you support is supporting terrorism. Therefore, we can't allow you to exist. So you're terrorists. I mean, how does anybody let this happen? It's so far outside of what anybody, like, if this was, like, let's just say this was Democrats doing it for a Republican group. They just do it about MAGA. I mean, the same thing in reverse for Antifa. It is so outside what should be happening. There's not an activity that you're pointing to. That's simply saying that independent media are terrorists because we don't like what you're saying. That's essentially the same point. It says, in response to the declaration, Texas governor stated that the Muslim Brotherhood and CAR have long made their goals clear. He says to forcibly impose Sharia law, one of the biggest lies, basically just fear-mongering, complete baseless lies out there, and establish Islam's mastership over the world, which is what they quoted. He further accused both organizations of using violence to subvert local laws and supporting or engaging in terrorism around the globe. Now, in regard to the laws, make the case. I don't disagree that there's plenty of things that are happening like that, but understanding that what we're talking about may very well be a foreign thing, which is happening with Israel all over the place. So look at all of it. But at the end of the day, we're talking about, like in Michigan, people that have moved there who are Americans, or people who are moving there that are immigrants, but both of which are being there legally. Now, I'm not getting into the illegal immigration part of it. I'm talking about the bulk of the people that live in any one of these places. If we have time, we'll get to the Somalia overlap in Minnesota as well. But we're talking about people that move there and then they can vote. So they vote and things change. You may not like that. I may not like that. But and I'm not even saying that. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether we like it or not. It ultimately is what you always claim you're fighting for. Not me. No, I don't want a government, but that you say democracy, right? And we're voting and, the whole thing. And so if your argument is that they voted for something we don't agree with, and that's why it shouldn't happen, then you're ridiculous. You're a clown. You are hypocritical. It's ridiculous to me. So what I'm saying is, in regard to first the, prayers being played or whatever it is. First of all, that happens with Christianity and Judaism and everything, not necessarily the same things, but very public things like that, or praying in public or having marches, happens all over the place. And yes, we should be concerned about potential things that could be used, foreign country influence. Yes. But like I'm saying, even with Israel, guys, it's about when they break the law. You can't just go, I think you have an idea that might lead to that, because that will be used by the government against everybody. But in regard to Sharia law, this has been a claim that's been made forever. First of all, that wouldn't be constitutional. Doesn't mean they can't do it. They've done a lot of stuff unconstitutional, but there's nothing in earnest that's even beginning that to happen. They're simply implying that it's happening secretly or without legislation. And then they're pushing out legislation that says the anti-Sharia law thing. It's just, if you care enough about that and you're not some blind follower of partisanship, go look for yourself. Go earnestly do your due diligence and look at what they're claiming. And you tell me where there's any real movement of some kind of Sharia law overtake. Almost every single one of them that I have researched is completely taken out of context or misrepresented or completely lied about. Now, that's not to say that if there is anything actually beginning or crimes committed in that direction that we shouldn't care about. Of course we should. Anybody trying to subvert, circumvent our structure or our laws, like Israel, for example, should be a problem, or China, or the UK, or anybody else. Goes on to say, Abbott is fiercely pro-Israel and has a record of putting Israeli interest above those of Texans. For example, earlier this year, when the city of San Marcos considered a non-binding resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, Abbott threatened to cut off state funding, just like Trump showed him, right? That's what Trump does. They'll simply jump in and claim it's for something else, terrorism thing or, whatever it is. But what you just did was say, you're not allowed to do what you're legally allowed to do because I don't agree with it. Back in 2017, he even signed, which you all know, the state's original anti-BDS. We covered that when it happened. It was a big deal. Boycott, divestment, sanctions. He literally wrote a law that says you can't do something that's constitutionally protected. He should have been impeached right there. Known as the House Bill 89. Now, later that same year, which you also know, when Hurricane Harvey devastated the state and ruined many Texans' lives, residents of that town of Dickinson who had been affected by that natural disaster were required, and I still have proof, actual images of those things they were forced to sign, videos, in fact, they were required to sign Israel loyalty pledges. We know this is being made of Congress. We know this is being made so many places. It's amazing we still have to debate that's even happening. Certifying that they would not boycott Israel. And if they had to do that to get the aid that your tax dollars paid for. The governor defended his decision, meaning on the record that you could prove it was real because he even defended it, to push through legislation that was claiming that, quote, anti-Israel policies are anti-Texas policies. Well, no, it's not. One's Israel, one's Texas, one's America, one's a foreign country. So you're showing us the reality. But the point overall, so they're in need of aid in the middle of a disaster, and you decide that's the appropriate time to be like, you have to pledge you won't go after them because we might be racist. Otherwise, you don't get aid that you paid for. There's no defending that, guys. And this is why it's so ridiculous where we are. Just like people are finally starting to turn in regard to the current support of Trump, which is not just about Trump, it's about people becoming aware of the partisanship deception, that these things are everywhere you look. Like I just described that. You don't need to see anything else. It's very clear what he's doing right there, and yet he's still there. And I don't think that's because people support him in Texas, which is where the anti-Muslim march this Tuesday, led by a man named Jake Lang, comes into the fold. Lang is currently contending for Marco Rubio's occupied seat in the U.S. Senate. Interesting, right? Because Marco Rubio was pretty roundly hated by the MAGA movement until Trump put him there. And then he was great. He's our hero. And Trump and Rubio hate each other very clearly. They really a lot of clips of them hate, he's a stupid, he's an idiot. He's I forget the terms he used, like cheap shots like that. And then now they're friends. So it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to get him out of the way in some way, even going beyond this administration. And where it says that he is fighting for Rubio's seat, and that Lang has attracted a lot of attention after he was pardoned, of course, by Donald Trump for his participation in January 6th. And it says, despite any or only about a dozen anti-Islam protesters, despite only about a dozen showing up to back what he was doing, who, by the way, is not from Dearborn, Michigan, which is where it was, and traveled there solely to stage this protest, the series of incidents that occurred that day all went viral on social media because of people like Nick Sorter and the rest. I mean, literally, he was one of them. And it says particularly on Twitter, of course, where they were heavily promoted as a series of accounts routinely boosted by Elon Musk. So you have 12 people going out there screaming about pushing back. And ultimately that became the big thing about pushing back. And the reality was there wasn't something bad happening. There was no actual terrorism. It's just about trying to create the drive to hate them irrationally. Now, it says other videos from that day show protesters draped in American flags, having friendly conversations with their Muslim American neighbors, expressing opposition to what Lang was doing. One video posted by Hassan Chami on Twitter featured a conversation between himself and a number of protesters. One of them described Lang's small group as provocateurs, expressing that he is not even from here. And he comes up here to make trouble, so we have to fix it when he leaves. People that are in these protests regularly. And so the point is he's coming into Michigan, trying to create the error of what Trump and them are saying. And the people there don't want that. Even the ones on the opposite side of the Muslim American protest. And it says, and another protester then commented, we don't even know that loser. And it says Jake Lang later claimed, and this is where I think is insane, that he had been assaulted. This is what happens every time to make the narrative after, there's some face-to-face video that they point to and go, big cases that they were violent and they're all evil Muslims. That's what they're trying to create. And so he shows up, which you'll see next, and literally tries to create, like they do, something that will cause a reaction they can then misrepresent. So he later claimed he was assaulted, which doesn't appear to have happened by anyone's account. And it says, however, he arrived in Dearborn, a majority Muslim city, by the way, smacking a Quran with a piece of pork. That's literally what he was doing. It's like, think of holding the Bible, and I'm trying to think of an overlap. So in the Muslim culture, pork is what's the right word for it? I forget. It's just, you're not supposed to consume it, or even it's like having it on the Quran is a big deal. So consider that from a Bible. And, whatever satanic thing or whatever you think would be the most disrespectful that you could possibly think of. And you show up to a Christian protest, smacking the Bible in their face and acting like you're the one that's on the right side of the conversation. And, of course, attempting to light the Islamic holy book on fire. Now, if you come from a place where every Muslim is evil and the Quran is the worst thing in the world, and, you're the child in the room, then you're probably going, well, it doesn't matter. Well, here's the thing. Even if that's true, you must understand, and it's not, but you must understand that there are people who believe they're Muslim that don't fully understand that, or people that believe, whatever you think like that, because that exists, whether it's 10%, 1%. So you're going out there and doing that, insulting people by and large, whether or not they're part of what you think you're fighting. Because I don't even think they think like that. I think the game is we need to create the illusion that these people are what we say they are. That's what's happening. And so he shows up lighting on fire the Bible or the Quran, just to make the point in your mind. And that's not supposed to be designed to create conflict. And even if he was assaulted, are you kidding? I know many people in the MAGA movement who would instantly fight somebody if they were burning a Bible. So please have some perspective here. And it says he then proceeded to speak at the Dearborn City Council meeting. Now get this, guys, at a place that is majority Muslim. He goes to this council meeting where he told the Muslim council members, quote, you guys are outbreeding, whatever that means, insidious parasites on the American way of life. Not because he says they're Hamas supporters, because they're Muslim. Like Laura says, Muslims shouldn't even be in this country. Muslims shouldn't be allowed in Congress. No different than saying Jews shouldn't be allowed in this country, and then Jews shouldn't be allowed in Congress, or Christians shouldn't be allowed in this country. It is disgusting at its core. And so this is what he said in front of them in the council of people that are majority Muslim. I mean, you can't be more ridiculous than that. And it says this kind of behavior is always intended to stoke social tensions and even provoke violence. But ultimately, it failed to divide the local community and primarily resulted in a widely publicized media stunt. Now, it says for context, Muslim Americans currently make up just over 1% of the U.S. population, making them an extremely small minority. By comparison, there are roughly twice as many Jews in America than there are Muslims, which doesn't make it to people who may think that's one. The point is to make that if you're going to be worried about which is the sentiment seemingly from a lot of people that the Jews are overtaking the country, which I don't think is the reality. I think it's Zionism when you understand the picture that overlaps with both Christians and Judaism as well as atheism. The point, though, is if you think that, then, or rather, if you think the reality from a verse is that from, I think, largely Republican side, that the Arabs are taking over the country, well, the argument goes both ways. And the reality being that neither of them are the religion aspects. It is all about trying to create the divide. And even if you think that 1% of people, how in the world could that possibly be an overtake? It is just a misrepresentation. But it's a stirring up hysteria about a supposed Muslim takeover, which is statistically impossible with where it is, or the boogeyman of Sharia law being imposed, which is not happening, also provides the justification politicians need to advance their agendas and further restrict freedom of speech. But the messaging used by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and the Senate hopeful Jake Lang is remarkably similar, because there is often little distinction made between Muslim groups. AIPAC and its allies need only purchase politicians in order to have them target Muslim organizations that are vocal on Palestine, such as CAIR. So I think this is pretty damn clear. Now, I believe we have time to get to it all today, but just in case we don't, the same point is made about Minnesota and Somalis, I think. That comes out to, I think, 1.1% of the entire population. And yet right now, Trump is acting like they're overtaking the entire state. It's just disgusting. Why? Because they're currently bombing that country in an incredible amount. But we don't talk about that apparently in our political conversation in this country. So first, on this, continuing this segment, here's Laura Loomer. Please bookmark this on the 21st. The GOP is losing the midterms in 2026. That's why that's what happens when America is Islamified by African migrants who practice Sharia law, which, by the way, would be their right to practice whatever they believe in their own home. It's just this is just bad people. And the GOP refuses to take action. Now, realistically, the idea that all of them promote Sharia law is not even true. I mean, it's easy to prove, but that's the point about people like this. And she goes, I'm so sick of the lack of action. We're losing our country to Islamic jihad. Even just the way she said that is just so dumb and ignorant. The point, though, is that, okay, so now we'll get to the next Trump meeting with the very person she says is leading that in the government. So, but yet she still supports Trump because they will, no matter what. But she even previously said, I'm not voting in 2026. So, okay, so then what are you losing shouldn't be your concern if you already said you're not even voting. These are just grifters, guys. They're constantly playing whatever's in front of them to get their agenda done or to get you to think certain things for people who are paying them. I mean, that's what this is. But Islamified, right? Despite that not being evident, not being real in regard to what they're claiming, but you can outstandingly prove Zionism, not a religion, a political organization. The very thing she tries to claim that it's a political thing about Islam, well, yeah, there is a part of that, and that should be concerning. But the same thing exists for Zionism, which overlaps with the Jewish religion, and because it's used. But the point is that Zionist organization is without question, I mean, dug in like a tick in this country. Everybody knows that. I mean, literally everybody in this conversation is screaming about it, and people like this are still trying to deflect. I mean, I guess what else are they going to do? Randy Fine in Congress. Ilhan Omar, by the way, who is an elected member of Congress, says Greg Abbott called CAIR, the largest Muslim civil rights organization, a terrorist organization, and said Muslims are a threat to our freedom. Again, if you would be insulted if they said Jews are a threat to our freedom, and you're not insulted by that, then you're just a ridiculous person. And it's not about whether you support one or the other. It's a simple principled idea that you're saying every single person, including that guy that just randomly decided to be Muslim today, is suddenly a bad person because of the religion. It's disgusting. It's incorrect. And it says the normalization of anti-Muslim hate speech is vile. Now, I also point out Ilhan Omar is like anybody else in Congress, and I don't trust anything they're doing, but that's not make everything they say incorrect. I agree with that. She says this bigot should have no place in elected office. Now, that comes down to what people want to vote into office if you believe that still translates. Either way, I don't want any of it. I want all of them to go away if that was up to me. But I think it's really important to think about, the idea of just the broad stroke and just claiming that every single Muslim is somehow a problem. Randy Fine says you have no place in elected office. Frankly, you shouldn't even have a place in America. Right. So a woman who was elected into Congress, if you believe that's how this works, whether for him or her, doesn't have a place in elected office. That's just a stupid thing to say. And on top of that, you don't even have a place in America. So this is a guy who pretends to be America first, who does everything for Israel, and literally goes after Americans who are in Congress because they have a different opinion and says they shouldn't be here, even though this country was literally built and founded on, whether you agree with it or not, the very idea of the melting pot. Like, these people are like antithetical to everything this country represents. Here's what he said about Mamdani to bring it into this conversation. He says Mamdani thinks Jews gathering in synagogues should be illegal. Well, guess what? He totally doesn't. Very much a lie. It's not true. And he says, I will continue working with Trump administration as we fight this Muslim terrorist. Has he committed a terrorist act, Randy? Is there a crime you're pointing to? Or are you just simply going, because he's Muslim, he's a terrorist? That's how dumb this conversation has gotten. And he says Mamdani should be denaturalized and deported. I mean, guys, that's so over. This is what we were always telling you about the Trump move in regard to El Salvador, his floating of, 6 different times that Americans might be deported, whether naturalized or not. That's not constitutional. It's not legal. They don't care. And again, it's not for a crime. They're simply saying you have a religion we don't like in a country we claim has religious freedom, so deport him. Simple, right? And Trump aggressively supports Randy Fine. Torah Jews, a Jewish organization who simply points out that Zionism is not Judaism, says you are knowingly gaslighting to stir hyperbole and scare American Jews into supporting Zionism. This wasn't the story at all, and you are fully aware of it. And by the way, you can literally read what he posted, and it says, why care that the truth is being twisted to promote Israel's agendas at our expense? They mean Jewish people, by the way. Perfect solution. It's just, and these people are just absolutely disgusting. Let me play this real quick since I haven't played it in a while. After this, we're going to get into the Mamdani overlap, but let's take a look at some of the, here's a Jewish academic, highly respected, speaking about what Zionism actually is.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what I would like Israel to be. I'd like a democratic solution, one state with equal rights for all its inhabitants. Your organization, Human Rights Watch, issued a report last year about Israel, and the conclusion was it is an apartheid state. And there are 4 major human rights groups in the last 2 years who issued similar reports, reached the same conclusion. Israel is an apartheid state. So apartheid is racism. Apartheid is discrimination. But Israel is the only member of the United Nations that I know which is officially racist. And I say this because of the July 2018 nation-state law, which says the Jews have a unique right to self-determination in Israel. Unique means exclusive.
Yes.
It means Arabs have no right to self-determination. It means even if Arabs became a majority, they would still have no right to self-determination. So most certainly Zionism is a racist ideology, and it is largely responsible for the Nakba that has unfolded throughout the last century and continues today.
Yep. Avi Shlaim, highly respected, Israeli, Jewish, British academic. Here's what he's pointing to, by the way, since I haven't showed it in a while. It's Israel is the nation state of the Jews alone. Netanyahu responds to TV star who said Arabs are equal, right? So the point is that Netanyahu, so on TV in Israel, somebody the same lie happens in this country, an Israeli channel tried to argue that everyone's equal, right? And Netanyahu stood up publicly and literally quoted and said, no, you're wrong. Israel's the nation state of the Jews alone. And yet then you can hear our own people in Congress, people on Twitter arguing that that's not true. It's just insulting, as it always is. Now, let me grab something really quickly, actually. I want to include a video that I actually commented. It's a longer one, so I'm not going to play it, but I think I can grab it really quickly if I do it fast. Let's see. Where are we going here? There we go. Oops, dang it. Why does it look different for some reason? Okay, so it's a video that I just shared. Oh, here, I think this will be quicker. Oh, that's interesting. I've talked about this before, by the way. Oh, no, it is right there. Okay, I was going to say, because like a lot of times these things don't show up in your videos, even though they're there. Okay, so this is, I responded to somebody, and I'll just show it to you since I'm grabbing it. This guy, Eli Lake, says, if you're not a Zionist, then there's something deeply wrong with you. Now, he could be incorrectly thinking that means a Jewish state, state for the Jews. That's not what it means. It's very easy to look up, and that's why I play the clip here from Avi Shlaim, you can see, but also this clip from another Jewish rabbi and academic who literally says, this guy right here, he tells you, he'll walk through the whole thing. He'll go from the history of Zionism, how it was manipulated, how it started, 7 minutes long. It's very easy to understand. And I simply said, only a Zionist would say this while supporting the rape, starvation, and murder of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza. Hashtag Judaism is not Zionism, or Zionism is not Judaism. Now, I will include it for this video. Make sure you watch it. So back to the point. Let me make sure I grab that. Yeah, okay. So, Randy Fine. Thomas Massey says, Israeli citizen Miriam Adelson bought the Dallas Mavericks for $3.5 billion. Now she's buying politicians. She's spending millions in Kentucky to buy Ed Galrain, my primary opponent, because Trump clearly wants Massey gone, right? And then she jumps up and does that. I mean, guys, it's really not hard to understand. A congressional seat in Kentucky, why she want that? Because I won't vote to send your tax dollars overseas. Randy Fine responds and says, I can't wait to watch this bigot get thrown out of Congress. Bigot? He says, Miriam's an American citizen. Well, even Twitter broke in and said, well, guess what? Miriam was born in Israel, but she also has U.S. citizenship. So for him to so dishonestly try to pretend or that he's wrong. He's not wrong. Yes, she is an Israeli citizen. That's not incorrect. So for him to say, is an American citizen, as if he's correcting him, he's trying to convince you that she's not Israeli. I mean, guys, there's just no misunderstanding what is happening today. He is disgusting and is so clearly not fighting for this country and is trying to convince people to, one, fight away somebody who's actually fighting for this country, at least as it appears, and then convince you that this complete Israeli oligarch, who, yes, has Israeli citizenship, that's the dual citizenship overlap, is absolutely influencing U.S. policy and tries to lie to you about our citizenship. It just doesn't get any more clear. Here's what Donald Trump put out on Truth Social. Any Jewish person, and now you'll see why this is so relevant right before we get into Mamdani. He did this, I think it was last week. Any Jewish person that votes for Zohran Mamdani, a proven and self-professed Jew hater, is a stupid person. And Randy Fine says, truth. Well, how in the world do you make sense of that, guys? I'm going to remember to add this really quickly. We'll come back to it because of how perfect this is for what he just said right there. Let me grab this, where he says he'll remove all the Jew haters, right? Okay, well, he just told you that Zohran Mamdani is a Jew hater, in all capitals, by the way. Isn't that interesting? So seeing as how he just had a meeting with him, and if you haven't seen it, you're going to be quite surprised by what he actually said about how they're working together and how he's going to make New York great again, right? Okay, well, explain for me how that makes sense. There's only a couple things happening. Either he was lying to you and he knew he was about what he said right there for whatever reason he was trying to do it, probably because what I'm starting to really think, as I said before, and I kind of felt in the beginning, was you're being set up, that he's just another ploy of this long Israel manipulation to make you think you're supporting the guy you're not. I don't know. That's why you should support the statements and be critical all the time, no matter what, right? The statements you agree with. But or the point is that he tried to manipulate this, didn't work, and now he's just doing what he thinks is in his interest, even though it's not what you want, and you pretend he's fighting for you. There's no way you can look at this and not walk away thinking that you're being manipulated, right? Or rather, what we're going to get into next. Well, lastly, this is where we get into the overlap. Laura Loomer said on the 5th, it's funny, Trump could easily dismantle Mamdani, we showed you on the article, and his entire Islamic network, which, by the way, is not even, it's just Muslims, and the network, it's like saying Christian network, but they love to make that sound like terrorism, by denigrating, which is not even the right word to use. I mean, it is in a sense, because what they're doing is exactly that, but I think she meant designating and can't spell, the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization and filing charges against the Islamic groups. For what? What crime are we talking about here? And it says the 501c3s that funded Mamdani's campaign. Well, it's the same thing with any of these groups. If by the simple point of being Muslim make them terrorists, therefore funding him as terrorism, you could make the same argument by simply saying that, like that's like saying that Christians are terrorists, therefore any Christian network that was funding Trump it makes him terrorists. You know, it's a lazy way of thinking, and in fact, it can't be true in the absolute sense. To just simply say anybody Christian is therefore one thing, or Muslim, or Jewish, is stupid. We all know that at its core. That's why she's a stupid person. I'm not doing that to be insulting. I'm genuinely arguing she's not smart enough to realize that she's being played within what I think she thinks is her running this manipulation. But it says the Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial contains troves of evidence. Remember, we just went over the simple point. Read into it what Human Rights Watch reported to you after it was all said and done. We were lied to. They manipulated the group. They altered translations, and it largely stems from Israel. That's why she supports it. Why hasn't this been done yet? So she's calling out Trump on November 5th. Why haven't you gone after Mamdani and the Muslim Brotherhood? Okay. Now, keeping this in mind, let's start with the one that I think is the most relevant that I actually was going to play in the beginning and I forgot. He says there's no difference in party. And I simply said, like I said, there's no difference in party. Now, him saying this, I feel like was an off-the-cuff statement that he thought was going to be endearing or welcoming for unity, but it's for right now, what I think maybe they don't even realize that not only support for Trump failing, but the fact that I think most Americans are hearing my message or anybody else saying it, that the illusion of the parties is a game used to trap you. And people are literally seeing that. And it is part of the conversation. I'm telling you, like I was saying before, if you've ever considered my opinions, look at our track record. Don't trust me. Look for yourself, but consider them because of how often we have been right about these things. He is telling you which I don't know why I'm trying to convince you guys so hard. I know you know that there's no party difference. That at the end of the day, they will do the same thing. Now, look, it's interesting because a lot of people who are just not, like I said at the beginning, like some people may think, why are you mad about that, Ryan? Don't we want them to work together? And, it's a mixed conversation because if you believe that they're somehow working to bring policy together, like I don't think with Israel or a number of other things, that's really where we are today. But at the end of the day, it's not because that I don't want them to be a part of the same group, but that they are telling you, Trump, socialism is terrorism, right? Lefties are monster lefty, saying terrorism. And then invites the left socialist into the room and has a conversation about how they're going to work together. Even if you think that, even if I wanted that, the point is that that's insane because he's saying the opposite, which means he's lying about everything. And then yet, yes, at the end of the day, the government is all working together and lying to you about what they're trying to do. Has to resonate with people today.
I'll say there's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And
we're going to work with them. Okay. Which again, I'm not even saying I disagree with. I don't think any of them are in your interest, but sure, work together. Maybe it'll be good and I'll support that. It's simply from a Republican standpoint, you have to feel insulted. You guys have been building this up. That's why I use that image today from Fox, the socialism showdown. And you show up and they're like, we're best friends. We're working together. New York's going to be great. I mean, then why did you campaign? Why did you call him a Jew hater? Why did you say, this is just politics, guys. That's that's the reality. It's what's always been happening, but it's just shockingly dishonest. And we have to realize what that shows us about the bigger picture. Here's another clip. I'm just going to play through them. It's talking about the Israeli government.
And you did the peace in all the 9 months around the world. I would like to ask Mr. Mamdani, you've accused the U.S. government of committing genocide in Gaza while President Trump was working on peace. Why that?
I've spoken about the Israeli government committing genocide, and I've spoken about our government funding it. And I shared with the president in our meeting about the concern that many New Yorkers have of wanting their tax dollars to go towards the benefit of New Yorkers and their ability to afford basic dignity. And what we
look at Trump nodding along. How insulting is that? Like that's what you believe. You're literally funding the genocide. So too is Biden. Maybe Mamdani will do the same at the end of the day. Hard to say. That's why we should be critical until we have outcome, not just narrative, right? But why would he nod? That's what everyone's making fun of. It's like, part of me really thinks that Trump is just desperate for support because he knows he's losing it and he feels this may get him support. It could be as simple as that.
See right now is we're in the 9th consecutive year of more than 100,000 school children being homeless in our city. And there's a desperate need not only for the following of human rights, but also the following through on the promises we've made New Yorkers. And I appreciated the meeting we had and the work that we can do.
Do you agree that President Trump didn't do a peace and work hard to make the peace? Because he worked hard to do the peace in the Middle East and everywhere. Do you agree with that?
I appreciate all efforts.
By the way, can I just laugh at this ridiculous so-called journalist? His point was simply like, Trump is a peaceful thing and you're not doing that. Respond. It's like, what are you saying? Trump did not work towards peace. He literally is the opposite of that in every provable way. And this so-called journalist has twice skipped over everything he said and just was like, why'd you say genocide? Well, he was looking for peace. And then reiterated by going, Trump's peace things were peaceful. And you listen to it again. Like, I can't even redo it. It's like it's a broken English, but it's funny the way he says it. He's just trying to insert the point that Trump's peaceful and that you called him not peaceful. Why did you do that? That's his question. It's just not journalism, guys. It's just partisanship.
On the promises we've made New Yorkers, and I appreciated the meeting we had and the work that we can do.
Do you agree that President Trump didn't do a peace and work hard to make the peace? Because he worked hard to do the peace in the Middle East and everywhere. Do you agree with that?
I appreciate all efforts towards peace, and I shared with President Trump that when I spoke to Trump voters on Hillside Avenue, including one of whom was a pharmacist that spoke about how President Trump's father actually went to that pharmacy not too far from Jamaica Estates, that people were tired of seeing our tax dollars fund endless wars. And I also believe that we have to follow through on the international human rights, and I know that still today those are being violated, and that continues to be work that has to be done no matter where we're speaking of.
I mean, isn't it just confounding? He's literally talking about the very human rights violations that the person sitting right next to him is funding and openly supporting and openly lying about, unless he's just so far out of the know, which I find hard to believe. I mean, I don't even know the right word for it. It's not humorous, right? But it's obviously disjointed. It's like, I think it's maybe just meant to make you go, what's going on right now? Like it's jarring, right? But you can't, I mean, I think that's why I go back to that original point. It just feels like Trump is just desperately trying to like gain some kind of traction with maybe Democrats. I don't know, but it's just ridiculous. He's literally funding genocide and supporting it and lying about it. And he's calling that out right there. And he's nodding along. It's just silly to me. Here's the next one. And this is Eric Doherty, of course, like quoting this. The next one, these people are trying to make it seem like it's not a complete contradiction of what they were just like screeching about. This is the next one, the comment, the question.
You have a different address now.
The first one, it starts low. It just says, so you're a billionaire. Would you be comfortable living in New York City under Zohan Mamdani? Okay, well, based on literally everything he said up until this point, the answer would be shockingly no. Socialism bad. He's a terrorist. He's a Jew hater. Okay, here's how he responds.
You have a different address nowadays than you used to. But you used to call New York City home. Would you feel comfortable living in New York City under a Mamdani administration?
Yeah, I would. I really would, especially after the meeting.
Okay, just real quick. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Now, to be clear, I'm not calling him a Jew hater. I'm not calling him any of those things. Trump did very explicitly more than once, repeatedly, right up until this very moment. Now, maybe you argue, well, he talked to him and now he changed his mind. Okay, that's fine. Then you damn well better be holding him accountable for all the ridiculous things he said if he's now changing his mind. But that's not what ever happens.
Absolutely.
What makes you comfortable?
We agree on a lot more than I would have thought.
See?
I think he's,
So look, I can also be honest enough to say, like, maybe that's just Trump being real, right? Maybe he's like, I think differently because he actually thought things that I didn't think he thought. Like, maybe that's real. But what that would show me is that Trump is the Maggie with the fake steering wheel in the car, right? Like for Simpsons. That's what it would seem like to me, that this guy is not even aware that he's not actually that. I mean, that kind of makes sense with a lot more than you think. But, the reason I was going to say, I wouldn't say, or he's lying, because it just doesn't make sense. Unless it's just an effort to get support. I'll stop saying that. I just think it's this. I'm actually really fascinated by this overlap. I think we all sense there's something here. Maybe it's just a embarrassing moment. It's weird.
Him to do a great job, and we'll help him do a great job. He may have different views, but in many ways, we were discussing when Bernie Sanders was out of the race, I picked up a lot of his votes, and people had no idea, because he was strong on not getting ripped off in trade and lots of the things that I've practiced and been very successful on. Tariffs, a lot of things. Bernie Sanders and I agreed
he's super successful despite most Republicans disagreeing with that.
Much more than people thought. And when he was put out of the race, I think quite unfairly, if you want to know the truth, many of the Bernie Sanders voters voted for me. And
is he trying to make the point that he's leaning in a socialist direction? That's what is happening.
I felt very comfortable, frankly, in seeing that and saying that, and it just turned out to be a statistical truth. But no, I feel very comfortable. I would feel very, very comfortable being in New York, and I think much more so after the meeting. Yes, please.
And another obvious point to make here. Okay, so where are the Benny Johnsons of this? How are you covering this? It's going to be, look at Trump, the peace president, the unity president. Okay. Well, you were just spending weeks telling us how this guy, like a Laura Loomer side. Like, I wonder where Laura Loomer goes with this. Now, when we get into maybe the designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, how would that change this conversation? Is he then going to turn around and go, wait, he's actually a terrorist because they funded him? It's bonkers right now. And I think that what I'm interested in the social level is that, are these people who have been screaming about this guy going to suddenly just ignore that Trump's supporting him? Or are they going to turn around and go, well, Trump, you're doing the wrong thing? I think we know that's not going to happen because these people are blind cheerleaders. And that's one of the earliest points you should take from that. Also, let's consider the fact that what Catherine argued in our recent interview is, as she called it, reverse Robin Hood. Why has Trump become anti-capitalist? The point is that ultimately Donald Trump, her argument is he's the most anti-capitalist president we've ever had. I'm sure people would disagree with that. But with what's happening, and you look at what she's talking about, whether it's the NVIDIA or what are the other examples, even like a TikTok point, but there's more of them that I'm just blanking on. We're talking about the government being overlapped with business. That is the tenet of these things: socialism, fascism, the reality between all of it. But I just think it's fascinating, but alarming, right? Because of where this is going, and that I think that less people are supporting him, which then worries me that means things are going to get more intense. But I still argue it's a good thing. More awareness is always positive, because they get crazy about our awareness doesn't change the awareness being positive. But here is Eric Dougherty again. Dougherty saying, funniest president ever. Reporters on Mamdani, or basically his response. He's just going, it's so funny. And here's 5 times August making fun of him. Funniest president ever, har, 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 har. He goes, no, actually, what this clip illustrates is we've been watching a show the whole time, and Trump would rather burn down his own base and pat this guy on the back like his own son than stand up against a blatant socialist. Now, see, here's the point where we disagree. Like, 5 times August, I can clearly sense here that he thinks socialism is just inherently bad. Now, I kind of agree because I think government is inherently bad, but I don't think it's unique to socialism. And maybe he agrees with that. Maybe that's the case. But the point, though, as I'm trying to make is that this is so if you are of the mind, because Trump has been pushing that socialism is just the absolute worst thing, as Elon Musk pushed, where's he on this? And now that he's siding with him, yes, that's how it'll be taken by people, as a complete disregard that you're being, he's turning on you, right? And it says there is no 4D chess, just buddies hanging out with buddies, moving their own agenda forward. Like, this is what most people are starting to feel, guys. Again, we were talking about this a long time ago. And Jillian says, this is how they promoted this. Showdown with socialism. And here's what the question was, or rather oh wait, did I miss one? Hold on. Yeah, I think I did.
Affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay.
Yeah, right. So this is the one we were referencing that Eric Dougherty was laughing about. Like, oh, it's so funny. Okay. So the question is, you call Trump a fascist, right? By the way, the very word that Stephen Miller was screeching about being, the responsible thing for killing Charlie Kirk. Again, all these confounding points. And here's Trump walking back, well, I'll let it play for itself.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes.
Okay.
Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
Okay. So in case you didn't hear that, he gets into an explanation. Trump goes, it's okay. You can just say yes. And they all laugh. Okay, wait. So apparently calling him fascist is not a big deal and not a terrorist activity like Stephen Miller was screeching about for 3 weeks straight. The guys, we just can't let them continue to make fun of us like this. This is ridiculous. And the Stephen Millers of the world are the ones pretty much setting the tone, even though Trump seems to be making it clear that they don't mean anything. It's important to take away from more than anything of this, that these people are not what we are told, and we are not being supported by what we think we are. It's up to us as individuals and Americans to recognize what's in our interest. And it is not something that pretends to be America first and fights for a foreign country. I think that's self-evident. Now, the next one is the clip about the Stefanik calling him a jihadist. Again, the same kind of idea. You're working with jihadists in Syria, so maybe not that confusing, but people like Stefanik, who are very hardcore Trump, a part of the team, both of them, like in the sense that Trump supports her and she supports him. And she said that he's a jihadist, like not once, many times, meaning he's a terrorist. Here's how he responds to that.
Please.
Mr. President, Republican Elise Stefanik has campaigned multiple times by calling Zohran Mamdani a jihadist. Do you think you're standing next to a jihadist right now in the Oval Office?
No, I don't, but
okay.
She's out there campaigning.
Trump being a little honest, isn't he? Well, she's campaigning. She's got to push those lies. The bigot, you got to get that bigot vote, right? It's exactly what he just did. Well, she's campaigning, he makes that little face like, well, we know, we all know, don't we? Well, no, most people don't seem to. Well, maybe, I don't know, I take it back, and maybe they all do. And that's been my point this whole time. But the argument is that, everybody, like, we're all a part of the lie. Like, him saying that point simply means she's lying because that will get certain people's votes. And we all know that's how politics works. Well, he's right. Hopefully we can absorb that.
President, Republican Elise Stefanik has campaigned multiple times by calling Zohran Mamdani a jihadist. Do you think you're standing next to a jihadist right now in the Oval Office?
No, I don't, but she's out there campaigning, and say things sometimes in a campaign.
Isn't that sort of
She's a very capable person.
God. Oh,
But,
capable. A capable person, even though she called the man sitting next to you that you support now a jihadist. Because it's all a game, right? That's what he's showing you. That's what he's literally insinuating. It's all a big game. We just do it to get elected. Yeah, we know that. God, it's crazy.
Isn't that sort of
She's a very capable person. But you really have to ask her about that. But I don't particularly. I think I met with a man who's a very rational person. I met with a man who really wants to see New York be great again. And I can say again, because New York was great.
So now he's MAGA. Right. So he's New York MAGA. That's what he just said. He wants to make New York great again, which is part of America. So Mamdani is New York MAGA. That's what Trump just said. Do you support that, Alex Jones, Benny Johnson, Nick Sorter? What do you think, guys? Socialism coming to town? Like, government's bad. Maybe we all agree on that, right? Maybe we should recognize that they've been pitting you against each other the entire time. And the real answer is social democracy. It's all bad because they're all lying to you. Maybe we'll finally get there. Let's wait and see.
You know what?
Just wild. Showdown with socialism. Yeah, that worked out, didn't it? That's 5 times August rightly points out. You know, there's Borla from Pfizer. She hasn't been, what is the name again? Meta, Facebook, Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Mamdani. He simply says, at what point do you stop saying he's keeping his enemies close, brah, and admit that your enemies are all just his buddies? Yep. Now, here's Laura Loomer on the 22nd, says, I had to drink a bottle of ginger ale today after seeing Mamdani in the Oval Office because it physically nauseates me seeing Islamic jihadists infiltrate our government. Well, okay, so is it because he was elected or because Trump welcomed him in the inner circle? And are you going to call out Trump? No, you won't. But she will. She'll just like Trump, or rather like Alex Jones, she'll go bad, Trump, and then still support him because that's the gravy train. And you damn well know it. Islamic jihadists infiltrate. Is that so? Being elected, which you argue is the thing. I disagree, but you argue that. So how is that infiltration? On top of that, and let's not forget people like Naomi Wolf, who seemed to be one of the few who were screeching about the idea that it was a stolen election, which I think there's always cheating going on, but that never really got any momentum from the people who were always talking about that. Why does that make sense? Because I think this is more about putting him in place, it starts to feel like, doesn't it? And maybe Naomi thought that was going to get traction because it always does. And she's like, look, there's cheating. There always is. But nobody cared other than a few overlapping points. It's weird. You're not getting that from the large MAGA accounts. You're not getting the he cheated and the ballots and the lies, even though that was there. That was an undertone, but it didn't get picked up on, which shows you they have the ability to bring up or put down things that otherwise go viral simply by nodding to them. That's the way this works today. But Islamic jihadist, right? Did he commit a crime? Are you telling me he committed a terrorist attack? Or are you simply saying because Muslim, therefore Islamic jihadist? Well, you already know the answer. And to continue to get a pass to promote Islamic jihad, again, she's just a child, guys. This is insane to say. Islamic jihad, again, it's the same point. It's I'm so blown away by this and anti-American values. In what way? I mean, if we're pretending we understand, what we always tell ourselves about, freedom of religion, a melting pot, or the idea that, democracy and whoever they want and all of that, merit-based and all of that. So what exactly is anti-American values about any of this other than you claiming Muslims shouldn't be a part of that? That is literally what this breaks down to. She goes, I'm 100% anti-Islam. It's right there. That's it. That's Muslims. That's all that is. And here's where she tries to make this argument. Ryan Grimm says, trying to imagine being 100% against a religion that has some 2 billion people, not healthy for you. You're genuinely making yourself sick with this bile. Try a different way. She responds by going, it's not a religion. It's a political ideology that calls for the killing. She's wrong. It's not true. Simply not. Now, if you're talking about a part of the political ideology of the Muslim religion that I argue is largely influenced and driven by the U.S. and Israeli influence, but that aside, just ignore that if you don't think it's the case. My point is, regardless, there's extremism in every single religious category. All of them should be a problem. But to simply say that every single Muslim is a political entity that wants non-Muslims killed is just so insane, it should be laughed at. And that's what some people are genuinely pushing. Have you noticed that this very argument came out of aggressively on the front of the mainstream conversation over the last 6 months? It's always been there, but they've come right out of the top. People like Brandy Fine standing right up and saying all Muslims are bad. They've never really gone that far before. Not like that and not in this way. And Ryan Grimm simply says, well, here, just to read the whole thing. She says, it's not a religion. It's a political ideology that calls for the killing of all non-Muslims. Their lobby had me banned and debanked because I spoke with truth about their death cult. Right. So are you talking about Zionism? Right. No, she's talking about Muslims, which probably has the very same or does. The reason I say probably because I'm not thinking of the political ideology influencing every government. But the point is that Muslims, very much just like Jewish population, just like Christian populations, have organized political entities that very much use that to suppress ideas that they don't agree with. Yes, absolutely. But if you're only willing to call out one, and especially one of the smaller examples, then you're not being honest about the conversation. And she says, but you can't be, and she calls it Muslims a death cult, of course, clearly because they're the ones committing genocide, right? And it says, but you can't be honest about that because your whole business model revolves around blaming cancel culture on Jews. Does she not know Ryan Graham? Right? Because this is her only response, because there is no arguing for somebody who is making a rational argument within your binary broken worldview. He's not revolving around he's not even talking about that. And it says silence when I get debanked and silence for years. No, not true. He talked about it, actually. You're a hypocrite of the highest order. And he says, blaming cancel culture on Jews? Huh? Anyway, I've always been against debanking, including yours, but I don't think it was Qatar or CAIR that got you. What's the evidence of that? Oh, crickets. This is what it looks like when somebody with a brain barely speaks back against somebody who just screeches about things that aren't even part of the conversation. Ryan Graham is not making it a model revolving around blaming cancel culture on Jews. That's just the best she can do. And she says, please stop trying to romanticize the Islamification of America. The point is, right here when Trump meeting with the very guy she's trying to tell you is a jihadist terrorist taking over the country, and he goes, okay, if that's the case, you need to blame Trump, right? Will you blame him? Not as far as I can see. And that has to make the point for you. And 5 times August points to Michael Flynn, General Flynn. There is no 5D chess being played. Everyone needs to understand that. What you see is what you get. Now, that's kind of become a viral thing right now. There is no 5D chess. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's General Flynn. I think that started with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And now I've been seeing that all over the conversation. That's one of those wins I'm talking about, guys. You see it. It's breaking through the broken lie they're selling you. Now, let's not forget, back to the point, when Trump said he's a Jew hater, right? Mamdani is a Jew hater. He's a jihadist. He's a socialist. He's going to destroy the country. He's a lefty. It's everything bad I've ever fought against, but now we're best friends. Because that totally doesn't make you feel ridiculous. I mean, it's like you should feel insulted at your core. If you were fighting for the things in an irrational way that he was driving, for him to just pivot and say, never mind. Now, look, if he had been saying, I disagree with these things, I think we should be, pushing back on these things. Here are some examples, in a measured way, but real though. And then spoke with Mamdani and was like, he made some good arguments. And this very much, you see, you can already tell the difference in the rational way to talk about it. And that doesn't never mean that it's all positive. Obama was like that. And he's a terrible person in my mind, but that he could have been like, and now I disagree. Now I feel differently because he made good arguments and it swayed me. But he came out and was irrational. Socialism is the worst thing ever. Every lefty's a terrorist. Mamdani is a Jew hater, and then goes, never mind. It speaks for itself. And here is what he said. In case you forgot, I want you to make sense of this with him calling Mamdani a Jew hater and now allowing him to be in his inner circle.
We will remove the jihadist sympathizers and Jew haters. We're going to remove the Jew haters who do nothing to help our country.
So if that's, again, not what I'm saying, but if he believes that, like he posted, he's either lying about it or, hey, he was just campaigning like he winked about Stefanik and he, saying this to get you to feel one way or the other to get the Zionist vote in front of him. Makes sense. It's quite obvious. Let's see where we at on time. So basically, last couple points on this segment is here's Randy Fine. President Trump announced today that he is naming the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, which was stated, but whether it's happening or not is not necessarily proven yet. But he says, tremendous news. We will use this to destroy Muslim terror affiliates like CAR and Students for Justice in Palestine. Like it's exactly what Robert said. They're jumping right from that. They're not even focusing on that. They're going after a group of students who support Palestine because they claim it's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. That's so grateful to the president. What? This is on the 23rd. So what, you're grateful with the person who just met with the guy you said is a jihadist terrorist? Every Muslim is bad and Muslim Brotherhoods are terrorists and we know Muslim Brotherhoods funded Mamdani? But thank you, Trump. You see my point, guys? Like, there's just either Mamdani is part of this problem, or these people are so desperate to be supporting Trump because of what with the Marjorie Taylor Greene overlap or whatever else that they're going to just pretend it's not happening. I mean, God, it's like this kind of thing. Somebody condense all this down to like a 2-minute clip of. We just have to be able to see how overtly ridiculous this is. So he still supports him, despite what we just showed you. Here's Alex Jones. President Trump just confirmed that he will be designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Right? Yay, Alex Jones. Well, Dave smartly comes in and says, yes, screw the First Amendment. Hey, you're a hypocrite, Jones, and it's becoming very obvious to people with the brain. He says, quote, it will be done in the strongest and most powerful terms. Right. No comment to the fact that he literally just met with the guy who you guys all tell us was a terrorist because of that. Because look, there's overlaps to be made about funding that comes connected to that group. That was the main argument. So are you now saying that Trump's working with a terrorist? You know, you guys are just completely lost in this. You've lost the plot. And it says, if the West doesn't completely wake up now, we're doomed. Typical. Actions like this by Trump give me hope. But who cares about the First Amendment, though, right? Are you pointing to crimes that have been committed? Nope. Just ideas and ideology and connection to groups that we don't like that Israel also funds. But, you know, terrorism and stuff. Embarrassing, guys. This is worthy of ridicule. Look at the comments. Laura says, since the Trump administration plans on designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization announced this morning by Trump, does this mean that the Emir of Qatar is banned from Air Force One since he's been funding the Muslim Brotherhood? Now, what you'll note is no mention of Mamdani. Okay, so this is today. So you get the same point. So here's Randy Fine going, thank you, Trump, Muslims bad, but not talking about Trump meeting with the very guy they say that about, right? You got this one. Jones going, yay, Muslim Brotherhood, but not talking about Mamdani. That's weird. Now, maybe in Jones's longer shows, I didn't see it, but I looked at his content. I'm not, whether or not he mentioned it somewhere else is certainly possible. And Laura Loomer, my point is about the post, not necessarily more content. You can make the same point for any of them, is that they're posting about this very point and then not including the Mamdani overlap and how Trump supports him. Like, that shows you they're pulling their punch. So she goes, what about Qatar and the Air Force One, Muslim Brotherhood? Okay. Will Trump admin be bulldozing the new $30 million Qatar embassy in the United States so that any Trump admin officials recently attended the Qataris? Or excuse me, I was thinking of the base they're building in the United States, but any number of other things they're working with the very groups that she says are terrorists. Okay. That's the one I was thinking of. Are we still training Qatari pilots in Idaho? Well, it was ultimately a base for them, despite the way they framed it later. So many questions. I guess we'll just assume that one includes Mamdani, right, Laura? Coward. Well, that's what they're doing. So you either support Trump blindly, even though he's supporting what you say is terrorism, or you call it out and acknowledge that he supports terrorism. There's no middle ground there, Laura, but they're doing that. Randy Fine. 1 year ago today, Donald Trump asked me to Congress, and what a year has been. I'm so honored. Aside from the terrorism support, though, aside from the jihad that you want to fight, but everything else is great. MAGA. Well, here's what they're doing instead. And I find this to be hilarious and insulting at the same time. Gunther Eagleman says, boom, the House just voted 285-98 to denounce socialism and block it nationwide, whatever they think that means. And it says, guess who voted no? A majority of Democrats. Literally just admitted they want communism. Well, guys, there's many of them that are openly saying they want communism. It's just, I don't know what you think. This is desperate to deflect from what everyone's talking about. My point, first of all, is that Mamdani, they call themselves socialists. They literally say this is their ideology. And so for you to go, they admitted it, is ridiculous. But on top of that, it's just another political ideology. The point is, as we've continued to see in this country, whatever you call it, it amounts to government taking control of your lives. So for them to make it one versus the other, I've made that point my entire career, is childishly stupid. And you could make plenty of examples for why socialism leads to terrible things, just like democracy or whatever government you want to call it. History shows you the same thing. On top of that, to denounce socialism, so they literally vote to go, we don't like it, and somehow mean that's going to block it nationwide. Like, it might lead to more legislation, but that doesn't mean that doing the denouncing of it, and this is nailed by this person here. Build Movements Not Connected 2DC says, we have a whole bunch of problems and they're doing virtue signaling votes. I just love the term because we don't bring it up enough, but that's exactly what the Republicans do today. Just like the lefts, the Democrats, virtue signal. They're constantly trying to virtue signal about how much they love Trump or how much they're Christian or how much they fight. That's what they do, just like the left does in different categories. They're all the same thing in partisanship. And I mean like team sport partisanship, not just believing in certain political ideas and feeling you're aligned with one party or the other. But denounce socialism. Yeah, boom. We did it. We said we don't like a thing and we voted out loud and that changed the world apparently. Now I'm thinking I'm going to get into this in the next show. Just for time, we're about over 3 hours now. But what I'm going to talk about is just the point of how I'll read this briefly to show you how he responded. But the overlap was what he did at the same time around Somalia. But he simply says, it says the live news network broadcast multiple bulletins concerning Trump, beginning with his thoughts on Mamdani. He said, I met with a man who's a very rational person. I met with a man who really wants to see New York be great again, right? Make America great again. That's Mamdani, apparently, according to Trump. And I can say again, because New York was great. That's what he said, basically. You heard him. When I came down to Washington initially, the city was so hot and was doing great. I actually find it so gross almost that he says the word hot. Like, that's hot right now. What are you from Zoolander? You know, it's like you're not some 16-year-old girl, Trump. You don't call things hot. That's such a weird thing to me. And he says, we were having some telltale signs of problems because we had a mayor that was not doing so great, but was moving along. Yeah, another Democrat, by the way. And he goes, it really went pretty bad. I think we can bring it back. The question is, will he bring it back all the way? Will he bring it back greater than it was before, which I guarantee is his wish. So really putting it all in with him. His wish is to make, okay, so if you then connect the Muslim Brotherhood, what happens then? He goes, I think he wants to make it greater than ever before, and he can. I will be out there cheering for him, Trump said. So, and I'll come back to this, but he overlaps this at the same time with basically canceling deportation protections for Somali immigrants in Minnesota. So we're going to go over this in the next show. This is just them, Ilhan Omar melting down because of something that would emotionally affect somebody who's Somali and from Minnesota and matters to people they might care about, you know. And I'm not supporting any of them. I just think it's funny the way they frame, like, you know, it's like saying your mother was killed and they're melting down over it. It's like, well, yeah, man, it's a sad thing. Like, to say that they wouldn't be upset about you allowing people to be deported to countries where they may get suffer or hurt. And that's not to say that some of them they're all good or all bad. You know, just as always, it's being objective and not claiming they're all terrorists or all innocent. That's stupid. But this is something that would obviously upset people who care about those people. And these people go, yeah. And Naomi Wolf shares it. And so, Minnesota, 5,833,250 people, total population. Somali population in 2023 anyway, 61,353. Population today, 64,354. You know what the math is on that? 1.1%. So pretty much the same of the idea of Muslims in the country. So you have 1.1% of the population in Minnesota that are Somali, and you guys are framing this like they're taking over the entire state. Here's what he said, and that is what they're doing. Nick Sorter back in September 18th, where Trump said on Air Force One, Ilhan Omar was to be expelled from Congress after she glorified Charlie Kirk's killing, which she really didn't do. She's from Somalia, he said. These people come from a place with nothing, and they tell us how to run our country. And it just, I mean, guys, if you can't see why that is gross to just, I mean, all of them are one thing, no matter what you're saying, then you're lost today. Now, you could think whatever you want, but it's obvious to say broad stroking an entire group of people as one thing, especially a bad thing, is just pretty lowbrow. It makes you a very ignorant person, because it's not true, first of all, that every single group is one thing. That's just dumb. Like, nobody should agree with that. And we've covered this in the past. U.S. killing Somalians. This is today from 29th forward. It's been going on a long time. U.S. bombed Somalia 3 days in a row. U.S. bombed Somalia 97th time this year, 2025. U.S. Africa Command launches a series of airstrikes 3 days ago in Somalia's Puntland region. So maybe, just maybe, you know, stay with me here. This might be tough to follow. Maybe they're trying to manufacture consent for what they're fighting, like every other single thing they're doing in the world. But it's as simple as going, Somalia, bad, they're bad over there. Stop their deport them, and then act like you're fighting some bad thing. Also, Haiti qualified for the World Cup, apparently, and Trump then said they can't come here. They're not welcome because they're from Haiti, apparently. And I guess he still watches these fake videos Musk put out of them eating animals and whatever else they did, which, by the way, if you look at Dan Cohen's work and the reality of it, they were lying to you, like every other thing we've talked about in regard to the social media manipulation since this last administration. U.S. continues in its efforts to become an international pariah, he writes. But just think about this. Now, we're going to go over this more in the future, but the idea of what they're doing here and calling, by the way, for an elected member of Congress to be deported. You see, this is so over the top and alarming, and we know this if we're being honest with ourselves. Now, what I wanted to get into today, actually I will just because I want you to see it, and my point, like I said, is I'm going to be doing a show coming up with just only focus on Israel and Gaza because it deserves that. But as you know, we've been covering this extensively in the last so many weeks, more so on catching up what's happening more locally, but recognizing that we have been covering this long before October 7th. As Trump said, or rather the State Department on the 19th, that we ended the war in Gaza 2 days ago. Right now, and then one of those days they would kill 28 Palestinians, but still ended it days ago. Testing the ceasefire was the report. At least 24 people killed in Israeli airstrikes. Testing the ceasefire. This is the thing, guys. This is why it's not really an illusion. That's dumb, right? They killed people, and it's testing the ceasefire though somehow. And if Hamas says we're leaving, then they violated it. But even the AP can write the headline that says they just bombed people during a ceasefire, but the ceasefire's holding. It's insulting. And we know this. They've been bombing and killing and raping and torturing. This is what they keep doing. And I mean that. Right through this entire thing. Also with Lebanon. Ready to fight, Hamas reportedly says it's pulling out of the Gaza ceasefire over the Israeli violations. Right. So Hamas is saying, you keep violating this. There's no such thing as a ceasefire. And in New York Post, because that's what they do, says they violated it. But says Hamas has warned U.S. envoys that they are going to pull out because of the ceasefire, and they're ready to fight because they're violating it every single day. The terror group, they write, the one that Israel's been funding, right? Their about face, they write, came after an Israeli strike on Gaza Saturday. So they admit there was a bombing during a ceasefire out of Hamas's chief of weapons supply. Or they took out one, they said they killed a Hamas member. Okay. Even if they did, that would still be a violation of ceasefire, just so that's clear. And it says, which it slammed as a violation, which obviously it would be. But the IDF said the strike was in retaliation to a Hamas operative crossing into the humanitarian zone and opening fire. Well, by the way, we have a video. We'll show you. But here's the first part. We talked about this more than once. The yellow line and the way they're using it is a violation in and of itself. They're stopping people from going back to their homes. That's a major violation. They're literally building cement walls and blockages to continue to control the area. In no way are they, this is a violation in and of itself in multiple ways. So just keep considering that the very yellow line they're talking about, and then saying that this person crossed the thing that would already constitute, in the way they're using it, a violation of the ceasefire, and that the crossing of that violation is the violation. And so they open fire. So that's the surface level point. But what comes down to, I think this person was probably not even what they claimed. And I'll show you the video. It says it shared a video of the alleged incident on Twitter showing a gunman dressed in all black, who Israeli officials say crossed the military withdrawal line in a vehicle exploiting the humanitarian route before getting out of the vehicle and firing a gun. Okay, so one guy does this and that's enough for you to go, it's all over, even though you've been bombing Gaza the whole time? Like, this was set up, guys. It just is absolutely my opinion. The gunman was shot by IDF troops and collapsed. Now, look, just to be clear, I wouldn't put, in fact, I could prove it's happened in the past where people are set up and used by Israel that they then kill. And then point is, I bet you the person wouldn't even know they were going there to be shot. But either way, they're like, I mean, I'm talking like a Palestinian that they then say, go do this and we'll do X, Y, and Z. Or, which I also know has happened before, they kidnap their family and they say, do this or we're going to kill your family, which, by the way, has been reported. This is kind of the stuff we hear from the families that come out of the prisons. Anyway, all I'm saying, all hypothetical, is that what I'm going to show you next doesn't make any sense with anything other than like an individual acting irrationally or them completely setting this up, neither of which would constitute a violation of the ceasefire. It says Hamas also threatened that Gaza will not become another Lebanon. And the reason that's important is because Israel's been violating the Lebanon ceasefire that really never exists from the moment that it started, referring to what the group sees as a prolonged one-sided ceasefire. That's what it is as of right now. So, first of all, before we share the video, I guess technically second of all, Israel moved the yellow line. I didn't know for sure, but this is my point about being correct about these things. It was my opinion at the time. But what did I say? The yellow line is just an encroachment of the actual control line, and they're going to move it forward every chance they get. And that's what they did. The blocks were moved 300 meters westward. So at the point it was 58%, it's probably 65% or whatever that comes down to. And they moved the yellow line. Okay, now explain this for me. If they moved the yellow line, how in the world did this guy know that they were actually crossing that line if it wasn't clear where that line was? See, this is exactly like they do with the water, where they change the mileage day by day between 1 mile, 5 miles. And so they try to go out and fish for food because they're starving, and they execute them because they've gone out too far, even though they probably do it regardless of the line. But the point recognizes they literally moved these lines, and that in and of itself is violating numerous things, and then shot the person for crossing it. But here's the actual clip. So you got a guy in a random black car, by the way. So you want to explain to me how this makes sense? Now, yes, obviously I think there are vehicles, but look at the car. Look at that vehicle. And you tell me this is a Hamas member that's been living in the Gaza genocide for over a year, and that car is immaculate? And on top of that, he gets out in what appear to be perfectly clean black sweats. Not something I've ever seen, really. I mean, if you want to look at the all-black dress, that speaks to a lot of the things that we see from the Israel manipulation, but I can't know for sure. The guy simply gets out of his car and then just starts firing at nothing and walking down the street. That's all that you're looking at right here. And then they just shoot him. Boop. That's it. And that's it. That's the violation of the ceasefire. You see, that's all it is, guys. Does that make any sense to anybody, whether or not that's actually what happened? So the guy just shoots off at nothing out of the car in the middle of the street. This is how bad their propaganda is. And before that even happened, as we showed you, 10,000 documented ceasefire violations, 7,500 according to the United Nations by air, 2,500 by ground in Lebanon. And that's the reality of where it's going, right? So the point is, as we overlap, 20 killed in Israeli strikes as Israel and Hamas trade blame over truce. So the reality is they then went right back to bombing people because that one guy in the street, even though they were already doing that, bombing people the entire time. So they then target Hezbollah, they claim, in Beirut. Just literally proving to you that there hasn't been a ceasefire, despite them claiming that in Lebanon. And they bomb Beirut. And then this is from Grok. Based on reports from UN agencies, they have now conducted over 130 strikes in Lebanon since they claimed the ceasefire. 130. Now, there's more than that when it comes to Gaza, but this is something they claimed has never been violated, like in the mainstream conversation. And there you go. Not because Grok says it, because that is what's been going on, or has been going on. And this is Mastom, the one that we basically proved Israel wrong by being in Gaza. Here's the IDF saying 13 Hamas terrorists were killed in Lebanon. And it turns out to be yet again a bunch of kids playing soccer. And this is how this continues to go. We've shown you this back in the first time they did this in the Druze area. And this is how I just asked, how many times has the Israeli government been caught provably lying? And I find this interesting. You should never trust this platform or any of these things. But at the end of the day, I mean, because their answer is 15, that's ridiculous. I could show you 15 examples over the last week. My point, though, is look at the examples they're pointing to. 40 beheaded babies, a huge lie that Trump and Biden still push. Babies burned in ovens, a gigantic lie. All of them were used in the beginning to push their genocide. The very claim of systemic rape, or rape at all, by the way, in regard to what happened in Gaza. It's not, they're being shown to be lying. And these are huge lies. Specific Zaka volunteer. That was the entire lie. Hanging babies from a clothesline. Al-Ali hospital bomb. Al-Shifa attack. Ratsani Children's Hospital. All of these are huge, even using white phosphorus. These are gigantic war crimes, and Gaza or Grok is casually going, we know for a fact they lied. And we do know this, though. We do. But even Grok can point to how we verifiably know that, and we're supposed to trust that they didn't violate the ceasefire. Now, this I will get to the next show. I want to do this last time as well, but I want to go through this in earnest because it's a great point I want to make about the transition of like average veteran and people in this country that are seeing the reality of the long-term war of terror that our government's been committing in our name, and how even veterans are starting to change. Or I shouldn't say that because a lot of them do when they get back. But I mean, people are changing their worldview about what this country's been, what the government has been doing. Again, it's not that shocking when you recognize he's already been standing next to this Syrian Al-Qaeda terrorist in his own White House, or the fact that here, as Kavor Kalmasian says, imagine watching this for 14 years. These very people putting people in cages and then laying down your arms and trusting the Al-Qaeda regime, which is exactly what they're pushing. The people who've been fighting overseas, maybe thinking they're doing the right thing, are now being told to work with these people. Trump signs off on possible CIA operations in Venezuela. No big deal. Of course, knowing that the person they want to put in power is somebody who literally wants Netanyahu to control their country and literally sent a letter to him asking them to regime change it. It's all right there. We know that the majority of Americans do not believe what they're doing with the boats in the water are actually what they claim. That's at least from independent and polls you can find, but I think that's pretty obvious. As well as a poll here that Max Blumenthal shows you where most people don't support what they're doing. Now, I'm going to get into this in the next show. That's a guarantee, all of that for the most part, but I want to make this point even more clear. We've talked about Sudan for a long time, despite all these Zionists out there constantly pointing to things like that and acting like no one talks about it. It's just not true. Like you can see right here, for example, Sudan, where Darfur is a part of this conversation. Now, the reality is that, as Dropsite News reports, 27,000 have been killed in 3 days. Now, it's deemed a genocide, and it should be. Even more so, obviously, what's happening in Gaza for every single same reason. But the point is to highlight that this is also happening. Now, Chris Van Hollen saying that we can stop this. I think you can watch it. It's not, in my opinion, everyone in our government is somewhat aware of what they're doing, and it has to do with Israel. As much as you may think that's always the case, that just because it's not because we're making that up, guys. It is always the case, and you can quite literally prove it in regard to, I shouldn't say always, but in regard to the conversation we're pointing out around genocide. The Rwanda genocide, for example, which I myself wasn't even that versed on, in not the whole topic, but in regard to the Israel connection, until I decided to look deeper. And it's overwhelming how clear it is in UN documents, in their own statements, and yet we act like we don't know. Israel was, you know how I do this show, right? How often do I make a title like this? Israel was involved in the Rwanda genocide. It was something that serious. I usually would say something like, were they? Let's look at the facts, right? Because to be objective, this is insanely clear. They literally funded them and drove this into reality in some ways. Same thing you could point out with Bosnia or in any number of South Africa apartheid. So when you're looking at this and you have the Sudan accusing Israel and Germany at the time of being involved with this and funding and driving this, it shouldn't surprise you. Or Gaddafi, by the way. This is back from 2009. This is Reuters. Gaddafi says Israel, not Bashar Assad, behind Darfur war. It's not because they say it doesn't make it true, but I think the evidence should be clear as we go through this deeper in the next show. Look for yourself. Look, this is how RSF is adopting Israel's template for genocide. This is what they do. Same thing they drove in the racial divisions in regard to what happened in Rwanda. A great article, by the way, from 21st Century Wire, written just as by Global Affairs, from Khartoum to Tel Aviv. Israel's fingerprints in Sudan's genocide. And again, I'll include Robert's excellent article, The U.S.-Israeli Hand in Sudan's Horrifying Civil War. Now, I really quickly went over these last segments. Like I said, we will get into this somewhat more in the future, possibly tomorrow. But look for notes on Twitter. I'll let you know probably early tomorrow. It depends on a couple things. But hopefully this reached some people, guys. I think today's show was interestingly important for numerous reasons. I think it's building on things that people are becoming aware of. And, every time we give it another shove, and that makes it go even further. But on top of that, too, just the way it all interconnects. For some, I don't know exactly which part in particular, but kind of like, the Mamdani point really stands out, but it really does kind of connect things. And I think in a way that they don't even realize for average people, maybe because they don't see how much people are becoming aware possible. But these things connect with what Trump said around what he was doing, with what they're funding in places like Syria and around the world, what people like the influencers are doing and lying about and then avoiding and not talking about, and how Twitter is exposing these interconnected points, the general infiltration. And now we didn't even connect today, which we could have, the technocratic drive and the surveillance and how it all comes together. But guys, if you can't take a step back and feel the positive momentum in what we just highlighted, I know it's terrifying. It should be. But the fact that we see that most people are breaking through, as I've said before, despite their resources, despite the overwhelming effort and like their algorithmic control, you're still winning. You are still reaching people, and the narratives are not being put to bed like they used to. In fact, it's the opposite. Like I've been saying, and I think we can prove today, people, conservatives, are just not having it. And I think that makes them very uncomfortable. So keep fighting. You know, you take a moment and recognize that positive step in the midst of this frustrating and dark time. And that's not because of what you're doing or your awareness. It's because of the people who are afraid of losing power. Thank you for supporting us today. And if you continue to support this platform, more shows like this, let us know what it means to you. We do this for free. The content goes out for free on all our platforms. And if you want to see more of it, if you support it, let us know what it means to you. More to come, as always. Thank you all for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.